Live, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls. How are y'all doing tonight? Alejandro, it's been quite a while, my friend.
Yeah, it has. How's everybody doing? Thanks, Marcus. It's been a while, guys. Good to be back on. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Glad to have you back.
yeah,
Thank you
and
so
to
much.
yeah, I mean, like just what you did, like really inspired us. So this is one of the reasons why we're still able to keep it going because words that you've your wise words, we'll say. And then you have
Thanks.
your friend who I am not too familiar with. If I don't want to butcher your name or anything, so maybe if you would please introduce yourself, that would be awesome.
Aha. Anin Jayak, Bishka and Mishambe Noswan, Oklahoma and Dochbia, Beke Bushka King, Indeba, Shorta, Knamagayan with a Ojibwe Moon, Na Swabab Dakshet Schwatzo, and that's upon guess. Chikwamina Bishan Dodam, Borawad Mina Lumbi and Dao, Shishibani Kandatandagwas, Mina Namanwandane, Hikto Yago. So my name is Vishkwa. It means water woman, and it comes from a manidu that we have that takes the water that's flowing from the ground up, and that manidu is to then purify that water, and as it rains down, and that's the word Bishkwe. And I am originally from Oklahoma. I am a survivor of the Trail of Death and the Trail of Tears. Also, I've had several generations that were in boarding school. So I'm really fortunate that my ancestors did what they could for me to be here, and I'm very lucky that the Anishinaabe people were able to stay in their homelands so that I can return back home after living in diaspora for I think 3 generations. And so diaspora is a term that was coined later. So they say it doesn't pertain to Indigenous people, but it is a term that we use for being removed from our homeland. And so we were in diaspora from the Great Lakes after being removed, and we've been living up here now for about since 2011. And I'm Water Clan and Thunder Clan, and I'm learning Ojibwe here in Bakea Bushkaking in Hayward, Wisconsin.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Definitely, thank you.
Yeah, and it's nice to meet a fellow Midwesterner. You're in Wisconsin right now. I'm from Illinois, so
Oh,
it's been an interesting time here, I'll say.
we're at in
But
Illinois.
um, kind of like around. Well, I was born. I was born in Peru, but I was raised around the Springfield, Illinois area a lot of my life. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so now I'm just living away from Springfield. Um, but I think it's nice though. Being in
Mm-hmm.
Illinois, I mean, it has its ups and downs. You have the government, which isn't the best. The governor, what's his name, Blagojevich, was caused a lot of problems, and like people are leaving Illinois in droves and like going to Arizona or Florida or Texas. Um, but overall, though, my life living in Illinois was not too bad. It was fun. It was all right. I can't complain. But yeah, that
That was a really contentious spot for the Anishinaabe people. So that spot and anything I think was it west of the Ohio River where our mounds were at. They had many battles there that they lost that we don't talk about. Many battles, and it wasn't until they infected us with smallpox and started doing more of the mental games when they were able to pass that area. And so it makes sense to me that Ohio and Illinois are just these horrible places for Indigenous people because they were hot spots for colonialism and for their westward expansion, right?
hmm. Yeah, I noticed like a lot of Midwestern states don't have any reservations like Illinois or
Yeah. So a lot of
yes.
people like to say that colonization started in 1492, but really the westward expansion of America didn't happen until after 1836, right? So it hasn't really been that long. that they've actually controlled all of what we now call United States.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, like the westward expansion and whatnot, because I was listening to Russell Means, and he was talking about how, going back to the 1800s when, colonization started in the Americas, he said that how when we're talking about population and demographics, like most of the majority of the population of natives, indigenous people, do live up in the north, and they make up the majority of that. Like all the other like non-native people live like close to the border, but everywhere else, everyone else lives up north. So it's interesting how like the colonization of the Americas, of the United States, North America, was a little bit more recent than of the South, I will
Right.
say. But what we wanted to really, I think, emphasize today was more of like colonization. The division of the Native American population. Juan Chilo and I were talking about like how the Treaty of, I'm gonna cut this up, like Tordesillas, which basically which was an agreement between Spain and Portugal of like who would get South America, who would get like the East, and who would get the West. So like that's why so much of like the native population, south of the United States, speaks Spanish. So that created a lot of division, I think, which we see today. Because I'll bring up one example. There is a fellow subscriber who had told me that she wanted to also believe that she was Native American, but she was told by other people that she said that were Native American from tribes. It said that she couldn't be because she was mixed of like the colonizer from Mexico. That's where she was. She was of Mexican descent. So I think we see a lot of division from that area, and it's not just obviously from some people in tribes, but also from non-native people as well. More people wanting to wake up and realize who they really are, but so many people shutting them down, saying no, you aren't Native American. And Wanchelo and I have brought up like people that have stated their reasons as like, well, no, you haven't lived that culture and you haven't suffered these problems, so you shouldn't say that you're Native, or you're stepping over people's voices. So a lot of people do come up with reasons as to why we can't. So again, we see a lot of that division, unfortunately.
Mhm. Right.
That's where we're at now. We can tell by the different groups of Native Americans, entire nations, the language they speak tells us which of the European peoples were dominant in that region. You have your regions where they speak French, where they speak English, where they speak Spanish, where they speak Portuguese. And then, that gives us an idea which part of Europe took which part of our entire continent, from north to south. And that along with the apartheid borders that were created by the invaders, because they went to war with each other, staking their claims on our continent. And that's where they created their borders, is to say up to here is our land. And that gave rise to countries. And it's interesting, if you look up the word country and look up the etymology of the word country, its root, it comes from the word contra in Latin, which means against. So it's like a barrier imposed against their adversaries, to where, in that, it is the language and the borders that they created that begin to mask our original identities with nationalities, and then also with the different languages that we begin to speak. And there's an axiom of law. I used to study law off on the side, not in school, couldn't afford that. But axioms of law are like the laws of geometry. In other words, they've been proven over and over that to remain constants. And it's like what the Supreme Court judges use. They refer to Bouvier's maxims. They're like axioms of geometry. So they're like the maxims of law. They're unbreakable rules through experience that they've noticed. I mean, they could have applied like the scientific method, like, hey, this is consistently rings out to be true. Well, there's a maxim of law that states that the conquered speak the language of the conquered, and that begs the question: to what degree are we conquered, or are we willing to remain conquered or subjugated? So that all that has a lot to do with with realizing our original identity. It is like peeling back layers, and that's what created these divisions among us. And Bishkwe and I used to talk a lot about the how long she and her oral history shared a lot of amazing information about how her ancestors were warned by Southern ancestors and vice versa, and back and forth and around the entire continent of the coming of the invaders. It's like, we know that bad news travels fast. So there was, it was a matter of time before there were a lot of movements too among our nations up in the north, preparing for the arrival of the invader, for moving farther inland in a lot of cases.
Yeah, no, it is.
Yeah, we used to have that unity, but now we're temporarily obstructed from realizing that, and where we fail to recognize one another. When, God, I mean, we look the same in so many regards.
Yeah, like when you're talking about borders and whatnot, in South America, you have like countries such as Venezuela, which is named after from a conquistador who thought that Venezuela looked like Venice in Italy. And then you have countries such as Bolivia, which is named after Simon Bolivar, and Ecuador, and Colombia. So it's very noticeable, and it's sad that these borders are. I don't recognize them to an extent, because like they're used as like dividing indigenous people up, and I think that was really noticeable from my point of view, is when I read this book about Mayan refugees and how they tried to escape Guatemala during the Civil War, and they went into southern Mexico, and they were still treated as like aliens, or foreigners. So it's just really sad to see that. Yes, it is Mexico, and you can go out and we can talk about like different nations and whatnot, but it is like it's their land, in my opinion, and to be treated as a foreigner in your own land is very sad. But
that's where we're at today. We're a lot of us are seen as foreigners on our very own continent. And we've adopted the vision or the perception, the European perception of like, this is my land, like this is my territory, you're trespassing, and we've even, there's a lot of people who now give credence to these the colonial borders, so I mean, there's a lot of layers that we have to peel back, that we have to undo, because now and then with these borders, they've created these like cultural identities too, based on nationalities and those stolen regions. That's why many of us who are Native American, we call ourselves Canadians or U.S. citizens or Americans or Mexicans, Bolivians, Colombians, when deep down we forgot who we were. And all we have to do is remember. So we have to tackle these divisions within ourselves first.
One division I see and I can understand is I've noticed more hostility from the Southwestern Tribes, and that's what I've heard from other people that are subscribers that are like they've had experiences with people that are Navajo with Apache. Those border tribes that feel very strongly against a lot of us that are mestizos, that culturally we're not Native American, which I understand because the Mexican government was complete and utter bastards to these border tribes. So I can understand the sentiment, but I think people that are making a conscious choice to be aware of their privilege as a mestizo and to take a step away from that identity, I think those people are doing the right thing. And I think that's a move in the right direction instead of perpetuating the whole, well, you're just a Latino, you're just a Hispanic, because that doesn't solve anything, doesn't help anybody, in my opinion, to just continue on that under that same system.
Yeah, I want to pronounce it Mbishkwe.
Mhm.
Think you're right. Awesome. I was curious on your thoughts on that. The so-called Hispanic or Latino that wants to better reconnect to his roots, but he does face pushback even from Native Americans in the North. So yeah, I was just curious on your thoughts on that.
So one of the things Alejandro sent me some chats that we had, and I was going back through them and trying to remember what I was talking about. And one of the things that came to me was smaller groups of people tend to think they are special when they're in smaller groups, such as like if I'm thinking a certain way, like if I'm neuroatypical, then I must be like special or like have some sort of, and not everybody else thinks like me, right? And so then it's very challenging then to be seen as, no, I'm in a group and there's other people who do think like me. And these are common symptoms that we see with people that have this happening. And sometimes there's this realization within us that can be healthy, but it can also be really sad and almost like a death of identity, because it was like, that's what I depended on when I felt sad or when I felt isolated. I depended on this identity that made me feel special and made me feel unique. And so it's challenging, no matter what we're facing, to think that like for instance, if I had depression, my symptoms would be the same even for somebody who was white who had depression, who's black who had depression. There would be similar symptoms within that. And then it's really challenging to think, then what is my identity then if I'm not like having these common things that are just me, right? And then but it's also healthy, so it's a double-edged sword, but it's like an awakening, and it's almost kind of like a death of an identity, but that's not really our identity. And so I think that's what a lot of Indigenous people are facing right now that are federally recognized, is our identity was founded on us being this special group of Indians that had these privileges because of our CDIB cards. And we had these privileges, and we felt very like unique and special, and we took it on as our identity. And then when we're finding out that there is like over 500 million Indigenous people, and like Mexico is like the 10th and like one of the most populated countries, and we're finding out there's way more Indigenous people, and we're all sharing common problems with colonization. Some of us, I think, are having like an identity loss when actually our CDIBs were never our identity. And so a lot of people rely on a CDIB for an identity. They're not relying on their languages. They're not relying on their songs. They're not relying on their land knowledges. They're relying on their CDIB for these privileges. And so it's like a loss of identity. And it's feeling like, then what am I if I'm not like this? So it happens in lots of different cases that I think we can relate to. It happens for people of color who are sharing common symptoms with the colonizer, and they're like, no, like I don't want to have anything common with that, but we are having commonalities in certain situations, and it's happening within our Indigenous populations, if that makes sense. So it's coming to grips with things that we assume are our identity, and they're not actually our identity. They're just common symptoms of a much larger problem. And for Indigenous people, these symptoms are coming from colonization. And so I would argue that if having our CDIBs and being exoticized and seen as this minority and seeing like this pet of the government, if this actually does give us special treatment and protections, then why are our kids still having the #1 cases of suicide? Why are our kids still getting imprisoned at such a large rate? Why are women disappearing? Why are we still having these problems within our society if we are actually being protected by our CDIB? And what we're finding is that CDIB is not protecting us, because if it was, then these wouldn't be happening on our reservations. We're still getting, attacked by the police. We're still getting abducted. We're still having the same problems that are happening to our Indigenous relatives on the border, right? We're having our kids disappearing, and we're still the #1 in like going into foster care and having the worst education. So if our CDIBs were really protecting us and giving us this freedom that we assume we have, that's part of a large part of our identity, then what's going on here? And so the interesting psychology behind that is when you put yourself in a really small category, you're not actually protecting yourself. You're actually opening yourself up to more harm and to more abuse. And this happens in a lot of different communities. I was just reading a book about a trans woman who was Indigenous, and she said that her identity was really wrapped around that this is something unique to her. And then what happened is that allowed for abuses to happen to her, because not only was she Indigenous, she was also trans, and it was almost seen as a deviance, right? And that allowed for so many abuses to happen to her. But when she realized there were way other people that were in the same category as her, and she wasn't actually alone, and everything she was experiencing is not a deviance, it's happening in a lot of communities, and there were similar things, then she found a commonality, and she realized that her abuses didn't belong to her, that this was something that was a symptom of a much longer problem. So I'm trying to relate this on many different layers so that maybe people can understand that the things that are happening to us, we're not being protected with our CDIB. We're actually doing the opposite when we try to make ourselves the 1%, this small, fetish-sized, eroticized community of people. We're actually not protecting ourselves. We're actually doing the opposite. We're actually opening ourselves up to more injustice and to more harm and abuse.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for explaining that. For those, some of our viewers out there, would you mind maybe explaining this CDIB card, please?
Yeah, so the CDIB is a certificate degree of Indian blood. I think in Canada they call it a status card. And so what happened is we do have treaties with the United States. There are Southern Indigenous people who have treaties as well, right, with this, what we call the United States. And so what happened later on is they took the people that were that had ancestors on the treaties, and I have to be very specific about what I say, so I try to not do any damage to whatever movements people are trying to do. Sure. But so they took a lot of these people that have ancestors that are on these treaties, and the government said that you will have federal status, or you will be recognized by the federal government, and you'll be able to have education, and you'll be able to have Indian Health Service, and you'll be protected under the Indian Child Welfare Act. And we would do all these things with you if you change your tribe to meet the Re-Organization Act status, or the status up in Canada. It's called something different. So a lot of tribes did. They changed all of their governments over to match the United States. They did a lot of reorganization within their tribes to do what America wanted them to do, so that they could have these protections within their communities. And so this is a really large identity for people who do carry a CDIB. And it's a very horrifying reality to think of not having one. And it really takes being empathetic and really thinking about what it's like for a colonizing force to not recognize you on your own land. That's a very horrifying reality. And it's happening to a lot of people, right? This is why we're having this discussion right now. So a CDIB is a certificate degree of Indian blood, and it says that the government realizes that I'm an Indigenous person and I have rights. However, that CDIB is not as protective as we like to think. I can't even use it in the state of Wisconsin for anything, because they say I'm an Oklahoma native. I'm not a Wisconsin native, even though they have a treaty in Wisconsin with the Potawatomi people.
Thank you. Yeah, and
Can I ask her a question?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah.
I did want to just add the comment that that's messed up, that they won't extend any benefits to you just because you're in a different state. That's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, so it really begs the question, right? Like, what is this giving us? What is happening? What was the bigger picture here? Why did they do that to us? What was the mentality behind that?
That's like it created like an isolationist state for, like you said, that small community, right? Where it was like do you think it was like a double-edged sword that turned around, where it became like this, it created like this individualistic exclusivity
Yeah.
among other
So
Native people who weren't recognized, or
oh yeah. So I heard this one podcast where this guy was talking about, I think it was like, I forgot what it was, but I think it was a Joe Rogan show, which I don't know why I was listening to. Somebody told me to, and that was like the only episode I listened to, and I was like, whoa. And there was basically a white supremacist on there, but he was calling himself something different, right? Because they have so many names. And one of the things that the guy was saying was, why would you want to leave this playing field? We're feeding you. We have money. We have this, right? Why would you want to leave this playing field? And that was how I was envisioning what he was saying. And he was trying to say this idea of globalism, of everybody having these type of rights according to the great military industrial complex, right, is so glorious. And why would you want to leave that? And so in my mind, I was thinking, well, that's exactly what we want to do, right? Like, we want our own field. We don't want to be playing on the field with you. And so, yeah, I think when they did this and they made this isolation state, they really created an identity where we are really feeling like we're stuck on that playing field. And we don't know what any other playing fields look like. And we're afraid of what was going to happen if we were to step off, especially if you're only 1%. If you're only 1%, that's a horrifying reality to think of. What would happen if I stepped off this field, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of the 1%, the last statistics I saw in the CNN article after the census results came in, there was a gradual increase in the Native American population in the United States from 2000 to 2010. But from 2010 to 2020, it was astronomical. The amount almost doubled. It went from 5.2 million to 9.7 million, according to the census statistics, or their numbers. Now, where do you think this major jump comes from? Because we did encourage a lot of Southern relatives to fill out the census based on their race alone. Regardless whether they knew their tribe or not, being detribalized.
Yeah.
Do you think that these numbers could help the 1% that you talk about?
I personally feel that the census is a tool for colonization to use. And I feel that until we have an internal audit that we ourselves are doing, and I'm not talking about a reorganization tribe, talking about like an independent audit to actually look at the indigenous population, I am not going to be satisfied with anything the census have to offer. So I don't care how much they tell me about our population, because the last statistic I read, they were not expecting our population to increase at all. And that is very disturbing to me. Especially, when you look at England was almost wiped out by World War II, and they had smallpox, and they had Yersinia pestis, or the plague. They had all these things happen to them, but yet there tends to be a ton of people over there in England. So why did all this stuff happen to us, and they're not expecting a population increase at all? Like, that is very peculiar to me. And how is it 1% for 3 or 4 generations now? There's something very odd going on. So until we had an internal audit from a source that is accurate and can be peer reviewed, but is also an apolitical source, then or a non-political, outside of the realm of indigenous politics and American politics, we need an internal audit to actually see the numbers in America. But I don't think that's going to be done, because they want to keep us in this mind frame of 1%. You'll hear it. It's so overwhelming to me. It's like, I hear it so many times. 1%.
Yeah. And the majority of countries down south, they boast almost the same percentage, anywhere from 1 to no more than 10% Native American population within the respective colonial countries, if we can call them that. The reason we encouraged people to fill out the census was only to create a public conversation, to have it come out where people start saying well, where did all these Native Americans come from? It was only to spark a debate as to whose land this is.
Right.
Eventually it'll get to that. But if we can bolster the numbers by encouraging all brown original Native American people, racial Native Americans from the Western Hemisphere that live here in the United States, to sign on to the census and put Native American. They call it a mystery. CNN called it a
Yeah.
mystery. They said it's unexplainable. This is a mystery. And guess
Yeah.
what they did though? It's interesting. The CNN article is really interesting because the focus was on African American or Black people who identify or have indigenous roots with the northern natives here and how they grew up. Then they talked about the Chickasaw who had African American slaves or African slaves, and how they eventually melded into the communities and became part of it, and how they were claiming. But there's no mention of Hispanicized or Latinized Native Americans from south of the apartheid border, and how they're claiming their racial identity as Native American again. So once again, we're like shuffled under the carpet, and it deflects or it goes on to a whole other realm of people who are, claiming or reclaiming indigenous roots.
I would suggest, because I like to think of solutions a lot in my head. So I think a solution would be, if anybody's listening, anybody in this chat, if you're able to have some sort of maybe nonprofit or somebody who deals with population statistics and has a way of conducting an independent count. I know that would be probably astronomical, probably really challenging, but it would be so worthy for an independent count of indigenous people. And I know what the argument would be. So there would have to be very specific parameters for what you're looking for to, be counted on this census. And so I think that would be really beneficial. And then I think we need to start pressuring the Re-Organization Act tribes to quit disenrolling people. That is just highly problematic to me. So I don't know if you guys are aware, but a lot of tribes have different stipulations for who they put on their roll. And it could be because you have to be a quarter. They have a lot of different stipulations, and some people are disenrolling. And then those people are no longer counted as Native. And so pressuring that, and I would also pressure for these tribes to start recognizing, I do the best I can with bringing awareness. That's why I'm on this podcast, recognizing our Southern Indigenous relatives.
Thank you so
Either
much
by a
for that.
petition, send a petition to the tribe, have it signed.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marcus.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, Bishkoi, that you said that you saw the census as a tool of colonialism. Could I ask maybe why? Is just because the census uses race and ethnicity and whatnot, or I was just curious as to why. What made you think that? Just a way of collection of information from people that from the non-white population, or what were your thoughts on why you thought it was a tool of colonialism?
One of the reasons why is I think because of the way it's funded. Not funded, that's not what I meant, but the reason why it's used is to fund things, right? So we say this is the money we're going to put into certain communities. This is what we do it for. This is why we do this for. And so I just think about that as kind of like I'm like, and then the other reason why is underneath white, they have white Hispanic, white non-Hispanic. And then they basically force people to answer, but then there's actual literal laws, I believe. I'm not really for sure if somebody knows specifically what it is, but there's actually laws, right, where if somebody puts down Hispanic, then they're no longer a Native. And I don't know if it's true for African American, but if you put down African American and Native, then you're no longer a Native. And then if you're state recognized, you can't, you're not really then counted because the government doesn't recognize you. So there's these little caveats in there that's you're not really having an accurate portrayal of your communities. You don't really know your communities that well. And so to me, it's not an independent audit then for me. It's more of a, what do we want America to look like so that we can keep funding these programs that are going to enforce these colonized agendas, because a lot of these programs don't really do good, right? They're not really helping anybody. It's just this like bureaucracy, and apparently if they were helping people, then we wouldn't be having the problems we're having with redlining and everything, right? So
Yeah. Alejandro, you're muted.
Oh yeah, you're muted, Alejandro.
Sorry, guys, this is new to me. I thought we were going to do Zoom. I didn't really look at the link, but I'm looking at trying to find the mute and unmute. But
No worries.
and I forgot what I was going to say. But yeah, let's move on. Sorry.
No, you're good. Maybe you'll remember a little bit later. I was curious.
Oh, my bad. Go ahead, Marcus.
No, I already talked. Wanchalo, please.
Oh, I was just going to ask, what's your thoughts on, because, you know, even south of the border, we have our own divisions, which is really heavy, which is the mestizo and then the traditional indigenous. And historically speaking, like the mestizos have committed wrongs against the traditional indigenous people because they've been colonized, because they have another identity that they were brainwashed into because of the caste system. So that's, and there's a lot of racism down south too. Whether people acknowledge it or not, they call it colorism, but it's really just racism against your own people and self-hatred. So there's a lot of division even south of the border amongst ourselves. What is your take on somebody that's mestizo, that's not traditionally indigenous, that has no indigenous culture whatsoever besides, I mean, I guess just the general Mexican culture, which is like a blend, right? What's your position on them identifying as Native or going back, maybe trying to reconnect to those roots, and just trying to piece things together, you know, pick up the pieces, right? What's your opinion on that?
I think the journey to going back to your ancestors is something people should do regardless of what people say, because you can't really make everybody happy, right? I mean, it's kind of like the people who are like trying to make their body look a certain way to be physically appealing, and then the body image is always changing for what is appealing, right? So like they're always chasing this dream that's never gonna be in their grasp. So like you're never gonna make everybody happy. You're always gonna have people who are gonna say things. But when you start knowing your history and speaking your language and doing your ceremonies, you know, like the relationship with Alejandro at first for me, it was a learning experience, because I really had to unlearn a lot of things that I learned. So I took that journey on myself, and I had a lot of people that would probably have told me, no, don't do that. Like whatever people say, like, what are you doing? Like a cult? I don't know. People say crazy things, right? And so I remember I was in a car with a really respected person that is a really good friend of mine. And they were saying, they're not native. And I don't listen. I go on my journeys, and I seen a lot of in common with Alejandro. And I was like, no, I'm going on my journey, and I'm going to keep learning about our relatives and what they're doing. I just like to learn about people. And we went all the way to a powwow with him, just telling me for like an hour about the reasons why, and just going on. I was just daydreaming. I didn't really, it was like, whatever. We went to the powwow, and we put up our chairs, and there was a really respected elder. His name was Eddie Bentonbene. And he said at the powwow, he said, I want to take a moment of silence for our indigenous people. He's like, I don't care what you guys think. I want you to know that me, Eddie Bentonbene, is telling you that they are Native people. They are indigenous, and their children are in cages. And we're going to take a moment of silence right now to pray for those people. And the person that was lecturing me all the way up just jaw dropped. And it was like, you can't argue with that, right? And so it was like, so when you're going back to your ancestors and going back to learning your language and going back to doing your things, move with love for your children, for your community, to uplift your indigenous people, and just keep moving with love in your heart. And the things that happen are going to just blow your mind. And if you listen to the negativity, then you're not, like John Trudell said, right? Don't get stuck in a box. Thought is flowing. Flow with it, move with it. Because when you're flowing and you're moving, things are going to just be so beautiful. It's going to be amazing, like what's going to be able to be done. And there's a lot of work to be done. So there's so many places for everyone in our journeys and in our ways that we're trying to do for each other, right? There's so much work to be done. There's so much need for people.
I agree.
Yeah, that's amazing that it happened in a powwow too. That just made me so much more happy, you know, that they're going to be recognized. And I just think of like a really beautiful future that we can uplift, like those voices that have been, you know, just abused and covered for so long by the governments. And that's what, you know, Juan Chilo and I want to do, is like we want to give more power to them and make a better life and a better world for us, and make a really big difference. And I think we're doing that slowly right now.
Yeah.
But I wanted to add that, you know, bringing up Northern Natives and whatnot, we do have a lot of like natives from the North that really do support what we have to say. I was just bringing up specific ones that for some reason want to continue to, you know, say slander.
Yeah, like
Slander
shout out to Lakota Guy for being a bro, because he supports us. I don't know if you have heard of Lakota Guy, but he's on TikTok. He has quite a bit of followers on there. So
I thought
Yeah,
you were,
and
sorry.
no, I would say, no, that's the things I like to uplift. I try the people that are being that way. I just hope that they have some self-reflection and they really meditate in their consciousness and really take into consideration this is a major part of history right now. Like, I think we should talk to Isaac Murdoch and talk to some of these, like Lakota Guy, Modern Warrior, talk to these people that are really being willing to be open-minded and communicate with each other. Let's uplift them and let's have these conversations together. And the people that aren't, they really need to question where are they at in history. So when their children grow up and say, hey, when, you know, this was going on, what was you doing? What was you saying? You don't want to be the grandma that was like, I was telling them. You don't want to be that person, you know? You want to be able to look at your children and say, oh, I was there. I love my people. I love to support each other. And I was there supporting anybody I could. And like, I was just hiking and I heard this conversation in a bathroom. I think I told Alejandro, and there was this woman in there and she was like, oh, she said, you're so pretty. She was like, are you Nishnaba? And that woman was like, no, I'm Mexican. And that woman looked at her and she was like, you're Nishnaba? And she's like, no, I'm Mexican. And she goes, no, you're Native. And she's like, oh, yeah. And they were like, they started talking. And I was like in the bathroom. And I was like, I usually I would bust out and I'd be like, hey, no. But I was like, let's see where it goes. And they had this beautiful conversation and they were talking about how great her hair was and how they just loved like our features. And it was amazing. And it was way up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. This conversation was happening. So these things are happening right now, you know. I think the biggest thing that for me was when we had to carry our CDIBs around, because we were I think that was a big moment for me. Was I got stopped by ICE when I was in Arizona, and they were like talking about deporting me, and I had to pull my CDIB out, and that's when it hit me that I can do all of this stuff in this false narrative of thinking I'm safe, but that's all they see when they look at me. You know, that's what they see when they look at me.
Remember when you came, I invited Mishkwe to one of our ceremonies that a brother was having up in Dallas, and she and her family came down for, you know, the daytime part of the ceremony because we were up all night. And she got to see the dancing and everything. And afterwards, she said, "Oh my God, I'm blown away! You guys recognize the four directions too." I was like, and I said, "Yeah, you know, like, I mean, we do this all the time." So you never stop to think about it until she says that too, and you're like, "Oh, that's right. Yeah, we do." You know, and she started talking to all the people there, and a lot of them were straight from down south and could barely speak English. And I remember one of them told you, "Hey, you look just like us." And you said, "Yeah, and you look just like us." And it was great. And like she invited everybody there to a ceremony later that year or the following year in June. And we were all talking about jumping in a van and caravanning out there. But what's interesting is that a friend that Mbishko and I have in common, I was staying over there at their community in Virginia and on Okonichi, Saponi land. And we went to a powwow. I went to several, but I remember this one time, and our friend introduced me to this group of older men, and they were all hanging out there. Some were on chairs, these older dudes. Some were smoking their cigarettes, and he introduced me, and they're like, "Oh, so where are you from?" And I said, "I was like, from South Texas. My ancestors come from South Texas, and another part comes from Central Mexico." And they're like, "Oh yeah, Mexico. What's your name, man?" I was like, "Alejandro Martinez," and it's like, "Oh yeah, some of us have Mexican names." I mean, they didn't say Spanish or anything, but I knew what they meant. It's like, "And we eat beans and rice too." I was like, "Oh really?" I was like, "What? Like, what's up with this?" And so they started talking about how one of them started talking about how in the early 1900s, and these guys are Chickahominy. They said, "Yeah, we're Chickahominy," and they looked just like us, and so I mean, you could obviously tell that they were native, and a couple of them started talking about how in the early 1900s their tribe was on the verge of extinction. He said there were very few women, and the ones that were old enough were already married. So there was like an excess amount of men who could not pair up with a Chickahominy woman. And our elders knew that it was a matter of time before we were going to disappear, because they said because of the hunger imposed on them, the constant warfare from 200 years back and on, and like the decimation of their land being given away. They I don't know if they even have a reservation, but they recognize themselves, and I think they are federally recognized. I'm not sure, but and then they said, and with a lot of the people who left the community to live in the big cities to survive, he said a group of men. He said a lot of the men. He's like, they went down into Mexico, man, but like deep into Mexico, man, way out in the hills. That's the way they were talking. They're like, they didn't go to any cities, and they brought back real Indian women. I was like, oh, that's cool. He's like, yeah, it's because they had to marry and have children. So they went down to Mexico and brought back a lot of Indian women, and they started building families. And this is where we're at now. That's who we are. So it was like, it was amazing how they shared that with us. It's like, yeah. And so it was like Southern natives who helped the Northern native tribe avoid extinction. And I learned this out of power. And again, I was like, it was one of the most beautiful things to hear. And when you hear things like that, like what Mishko was saying, and I know Juan Shalom and I talked about this, we as human beings, especially as, indigenous people or Native Americans, when you really break it down, when you go deep down, we want to be part of a community, or we want to form a community. We gravitate towards cooperation. We gravitate towards unifying and finding that, in that amount of people will always outnumber the naysayers and the slanders and the ones who want to present themselves as obstacles to this, because we need to stop and think. Our memory was almost erased for the past 500 years. We were knocked out unconscious. You're going to get back up. If you weren't killed, you're going to get back up eventually, and you're going to you're going to be like, oh man, like what just happened? And you're going to try and remember what happened. And that's what we're doing. A lot of us have been trying to remember it. Once we come out of unconsciousness, because we were knocked out unconscious, once we're coming back and we're regaining consciousness, we're going to start asking questions, and then things are just going to tip us off in our hearts when we hear that, like, oh yeah, well, my parents or my grandparents said something about Indian blood or native this or that, or we come, and they're going to start making the connections, and that can't be stopped, because colonization can't last forever anyway.
Right.
That was perfect, Alejandro. Yeah, and I think it's even more so easier for us, an adoptee such as myself from South America, Peru, to find out more about like who we are, who I am. Like for the longest time, I thought like, oh, Hispanic, Latino, and I thought like Hispanic was just someone that 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 looked, you know, I guess when I was a kid back then, I thought it was just like black hair, brown skin, and that was it, you know. But there was so much more to that. And then when I like looked up like, you know, media for Hispanics, you know, Latin movies and whatnot, there was there was something that didn't click, you know. And I was like, no, I can't be Hispanic. And then I think what the majority of people don't understand is that Hispanic isn't a race. And then that's when I just found out more about myself, and I was like, well, you know, I also would say that I'm Native as well. Of course, that triggers some people because they think that I'm talking over them, or like saying that no.
Say it louder. Say it louder, man.
Yeah.
What did you just say? I didn't hear you.
It triggers people very
No.
much. So.
What triggers
before
people?
that.
Say that louder.
Saying that I'm Native, you know,
What?
saying that.
Because you are.
Yeah,
I mean,
saying
look at us. Look at us
Yeah.
in here.
Say it, man.
Yeah,
if I-
saying.
What if I said this? You know, let's go ahead and put it out there. Go ahead and research me. Maybe I am like an undercover and I'm from Mexico.
Yeah,
I
saying
mean, that would confuse people, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, it's not true. But at the same time, if I said that, people would be like, conspiracy, right? Like she's on here talking about Northern natives and she's really from Mexico. Because they
Yeah,
can't
how,
really
how much did they
tell
pay
where
her?
I'm
How,
at.
did,
Yeah.
how much did they pay her? How did she learn? How did she learn the language? You know? How did she learn?
I mean,
No,
and Marcus is actually a Cree. No, he's saying
Now
he's from
we got it.
Peru and he's actually a Cree.
Yeah.
or
Man, that'll be
Bolivia.
the biggest plot twist ever, Marcus. I hope you're not holding out, dude.
Hey, man.
I know,
Hey,
but
we
I'm just
appreciate
saying
the
it's funny.
support. Hey, Marcus, thank you for that support, man. Masking as a Southern native.
What can I say?
He's
He's
Oh
undercover.
my god.
he's
That's why
undercover.
That's why everyone thought I'm so quiet. I got to keep it, you know, under wraps.
Hey, what's out in the open, man?
Yeah.
No, me and Marcus
Yeah,
were.
because-
Oh, I was just gonna say, me and Marcus we joke because we know there's some people that are like probably
You're muted.
foaming at the
You're
mouth
muted,
because you're here with us today. They're probably like, "She's a traitor to Northern Natives." That's probably what they're thinking right now.
I was like, research it. She's not really. She's undercover. Wait, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm like, I love those picture tests that Alejandro does, where he like puts all like different people on there, and he's like, you know, are they from Mexico? Are they from South America? Are they from Canada? And then like nobody knows, and so it's like, you know,
that's like
It's
the
like
best
there's-
litmus test, you know. It's like, you know, it throws people off, you know. And
It
when I do
does.
those map presentations, even adults are blown away by it, you know.
Yeah.
And they're just like, you know, they don't even stop to think of the North, which is funny, the Southern people. And they're blown away when they see pictures matched up with their communities in Canada and the Northern U.S. and Alaska. That
Yeah.
always throws them off. So there's on our part, there's that lack of ability to recognize or even put those pieces together, that up north there's people that look just like them, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Yeah, how many times when I was in Arizona and how many times I was asked if I was, you know, Mexican, I'd be like, I'd look at them and then they'd say, you're not even a good Mexican. You don't know how to speak your language. And I'm like, what? And they're like, you
Oh
don't
my
know how to
God.
speak. And I was like, Spanish is not the language that would be the language anyways. It's funny how many times that's happened with me though. They're like, you're not a good Mexican. You don't speak your language. And I'm like, I'm native from Oklahoma.
Oh.
And I you know, it happens to a lot of us.
You know, on the reverse or the flip side of your experience, at one of the flea markets out here, I was talking to this guy from Mexico City, and we were talking about that subject, about because I was talking about how the ceremonies were involved, or what, that I go to Mexico or this or that for ceremonies, and Native Americans in general. And he talked about how he was working in Oklahoma. And he was telling me this in Spanish, and he said, I was working with the Indians, man. I was like, what? The Indians? Yeah, the Indians from up there, man. He's like, I was working with them, and I thought they were Mexican. But then I heard them speak English, and I was like, what the? where are they from? They're not Mexican. They speak English. So he started talking to them, and they're like, yeah, we're Indian, man. And he's like, are you Indian? And he's like, and he told me, and I told him, he said that because he had really long hair. He's like, yeah, man, this is why I have long hair, because I'm Indian too. And then they said, and then he told me how the conversation went. They said, oh, where are you from? He's like, from Mexico City, Tenochtitlan. They're like, oh, okay. And he said that guy told him, he's like, oh, well, long ago, we came from South America. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, that's what he told me. He said that long ago, and he said this in Spanish, that he said, the guy told me that in the most remote times ever, they came up from South America. And I was like, whoa. I was
Yeah.
like, I've heard that several times. So when you hear that again, you hear a consistent ping, you're like, yeah, okay, let's talk about the migrations.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks that we've been where we're at, that wherever Columbus came across us, that we were there for, that, they think that they don't realize that we weren't there, before that we moved around. They think that we've always been there in that part of the land,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was a really cool story though. The guy was just
I
blown,
had-
he was just blown away.
I knew an elder up in Canada. His name was Stuart King, and he said that there was a language, I believe it was down there by Peru, that was really similar to Anishinaabe, but I'm not for sure. But it was somewhere south, way south, and he did not know what to think about it. There was like a certain word for like rock, which was like sin, and then there was other words, and there were like some, and there was another elder who said that she was able to talk to someone over there by Mexico, and I don't know if it was Mohawk or whatever language she spoke. It was that similar. So I'm like, I've heard that more than once from elders, that it was a really big thing when that iceberg was down, and that iceberg was all the way down almost into Kansas. A lot of indigenous people had to flee, down south. And there were we have stories of our people going into Mexico sometime, and they learned, that's how we got the word for monkey. And that's how we had these other stories about, because our people were down there for a while.
A long time, it was like probably like, let's say like maybe 8 years ago, no, less than that, maybe like 6 years ago. It was on Facebook. I ran into this one guy, and we're involved in a conversation, and the guy said, I think he said he was a Pequot, that's from like upstate, like north of New York, I think, right? And he said our language is in a very old dialect of the, what is it, Aymara language from Bolivia. And then at the same time, and then when I looked up the original name of Pequot, of the Pequot people, they have Waki, W-A-K-I suffix at the end of the original name of their nation. And then I noticed the same suffix among the Fox and the Sauk tribe. They have Waki. So I sent those names to my friend, what's his name? I forget his name, but he has a language page on Facebook, Aymara language page, and he's from Bolivia. I said, hey, what's up, brother? Like, I want to run the names of these nations to you. And I noticed from your language, Waki or Waka sounds, similar. And he said, yeah. He said it's very similar to, in Aymara. He said, Waki sounds like what we have for Waki. It could mean three things. It could mean people, it could mean land, or it could mean nation. He said one of those three things. And this is a guy in Bolivia telling me this, because I pick up on these things, and I just wanted to cross-reference them to make sure. I was like, I'm not going to jump to conclusions, so I ran across that, and those three nations that had the same suffix. He verified that. He's like, he just, I don't know what it means to them up north, but I just thought like I'd get his version.
Yeah, Aki is land.
Aki, okay.
Mm-hmm. Aki is land. And like we have the word Mshika. It
Mshika.
Yeah, Mishika. It means like a turtle.
Wow, Turtle Island.
Yeah. I always thought that was interesting.
Remember, I read a really beautiful story about like how Turtle Island formed. I think I put it in Instagram, and how like what was it? There was a group of animals that were on like the land. I think they're on a turtle, and they went to go look for like dirt or like some ground, anything of soil, and I guess it was really rare or something. It would like bring more land because the animals needed somewhere to go because they're on this turtle. So all of these animals tried to go to the bottom of this ocean where this land soil was, but a lot of them failed. And then this little muskrat finally got to the bottom of where this magical soil was. He died though coming back up, but he managed to like rise back up to the water, and the other animals that were on the turtle managed to grab that soil, and then that's how like Turtle Island formed. The magical soil like spread all the land, and the animals were able to live happily, and that's how everything started. I don't know how accurate that story was. Maybe it's told differently by different.
That's Anishinaabe. That's one of the Anishinaabe creation stories. So there's lots of different creation stories, and that is one of them. And the word that we say for muskrat is jishke'o, and that jishke, it has that word like jishke in it. That means like dirt. So that's how I guess they make their homes or something with dirt, and so like their name is jishke'o. And so, and also that muskrat with the land. So that's actually an Anishinaabe story. And they're, the word we have for dirt, it's found in what we call muskrat. But there's lots of different creation stories. There was lots of different times that we had to come back from a really devastating time, right?
Yeah. Well, I like that story. Sorry.
Yeah, I do too. No, I'm just saying we've been here for a long time. So yeah, it's a lot of people that's their favorite story that I hear a lot.
In Bishkwe, here in South Texas, we found some resources to recover our language for Yuequepila, and that's one of the names that we've chosen. Because like we were talking about picking up the pieces, and you met one of the elders that is one of the elders who's spearheading that, and in that name, Kwe means blood. So Yahweh Kwepila, it's the people, blood, deer, because the deer is like the animal, like the central focal point of the nation here. And we also found out that that there are some studies that suggest that we can't prove that, but some linguistic studies tie this language, the Coahuilteca languages, to South America, specifically in the Paraguay or Uruguay regions. And then I friended a lot of people from Brazil, from the Guarani nation, whose names sound almost exact spelling of a lot of the words we use in our ceremonial songs. It's really interesting, but and I've tried, I even use Google Translate, and I switch from English to Brazilian. I'm sorry, to Portuguese, because a lot of them speak Portuguese. They're in the Brazilian Amazon. And I answer them questions. I ask them a lot of questions, but a lot of time they don't answer, They'll see it, but then they don't answer, And I ask them like, hey, what does this mean? Because we have this word. Does this word mean anything to you? We use it in our ceremonial songs. Or does this word, or I'll take words. I see that they use similar words from our language dictionaries. That's me always trying to make connections.
I was just gonna mention, Alejandro, that you mentioned the deer is really, I guess, sacred or very integral to the Coahuiltecans. Same thing with the Guachichils. The deer was also a big deal with us as well. I think, but our peoples literally interacted. They live side by side, really close. So it makes sense.
Yeah, and we have a friend from San Luis Potosi who's part of our group, and because the elder said, is like, man, all the generically called Chichimeca tribes, He's like, they were all part of this, and we even did some date checking using the Starry Nights program, the astronomy program, where we saw that the Comanche, not too long before the Spaniards came into Texas, the Comanche arrived from up north. They're Shoshone, and they were, they spread throughout Texas, and we found out, the elders showed us that every time the Comanche attacked the Spanish mission, it was he entered the date on the Starry Nights program, and we saw the same alignment consistently when they attacked. So we enter the date, we see the same planetary alignments. And then in Mexico, there was this very famous battle in Querétaro. I entered the date and the same exact alignment. It's like, man, these guys were going to war when the real deities or the spirits in the sky dictated when it was favorable. They were following a larger pattern in the sky. And it was amazing to see that in Querétaro, the Otomi and the Chichimeca tribes chose a date to go to war under the same alignments that the Comanche were using. So there was a lot of shared knowledge, and it's up to us to, whoever wants to or feels that that need or that necessity or that want to ask these questions. And if you find something out, save it somehow, write it down, and then you'll start making connections. And like what Mishka was saying is when we say yes, we open ourselves to many more opportunities. Instead of being negative, being a naysayer, don't shoot yourself in the foot. Once you realize, it's not about finding yourself, it's about remembering who you are. There's a memory within us that couldn't be killed, and it's coming back out. It's it's resuscitated. When you open yourself to those opportunities and you're open to them and you're going to say, yes, I want to do this, the possibilities are going to be endless, and you're not going to live in a place of isolation where other people want to keep you. So it's that's what we're all a part of, and I think this podcast is based on that. It's we're going to reach out across our lands and use this technology to start repairing, these connections that we still have, and remember them.
Yeah, my Guachicil elder, he always he says this a lot, where he says la ancestralidad se vive, se siente, se lleva en la sangre. So, but basically, what he's saying is, you live by your ancestry. It's you feel your ancestry, and you have it in your blood. You carry it. You have that memory. That's what they always say in all those Guachichils down in San Luis Potosí, and that's completely valid in all our cases.
And on that, I want to add something. I used to have an Alaskan Malamute, from the northern dogs from up in the Arctic, and I got it as a puppy, and I'll never forget. And this is a biological observation, and we can apply this to ourselves in many ways. For instance, you notice that whenever I put the water bowl down for the dog would stand on its hind legs and with its front paws just start pouncing on the water and splashing. And I would be like, what are you doing? Why are you not going to drink? And then the dog would drink after you did that. So I was talking to a friend a long time ago, around that time, and I told her, I was like, yeah, I have an Alaskan Malamute. And she asked me, hey, does that dog pounce the water before it drinks? I said, yeah, did I already tell you something about it? She's like, no, those dogs do it. I was like, why? She's like, it's in their DNA. That's how they drink water. They're used to breaking the ice with their front paws. They're used to breaking their paws, the ice with their front paws to drink the water that's under the ice. So how, if we can think about that, how does that apply to us? How does it show, how have things come out from us that are specifically to our people, our race, our genetic ancestry, and our ancestral memory? There's a lot of things. That's up to everybody to ask themselves that question if they would like to, and I encourage it. So many things that we're doing that we don't realize that are native, even the laugh, when I hear in Mishque's conversations, or when she's laughing, or other native friends, the women, the northern women, they laugh just like the schoolgirls in my elementary school when I was going to, doing the it's like, it's a state. When I heard you all doing that, when I hear like Northern Native women, that's like I'm taken back to like my elementary school years, with the and it's hilarious. It's like
That's funny. Yeah.
just little things like that.
I'm gonna probably have to be going here in a little bit, so I was wondering if we can do like, I didn't know how long it was gonna go, but I was wondering if we could do like a question, if people had like, if we could do like 10 minutes of question, and then I'm probably gonna have to get ready.
Yeah, yes, certainly. Do you have the live pulled up beside you? Otherwise, we can just read questions that pop up. But you could always see them too if you have it pulled up on YouTube.
Yeah, and you can go ahead and ask, but we can always have like another time where we come together. Maybe I can have somebody else on. I can ask my coworker or maybe some people that may be interested and reach out to them, and maybe we could have some other people on, because I would like to have other Indigenous people that have, maybe somebody from Canada who has a status, or
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the more the merrier. I mean, we'd love to have them on the podcast. Yes.
yeah.
I could probably have if I can get the link, maybe I could up in Canada, Jocelyn Wabano Ayatal said that she wanted to speak on behalf of Southern natives too, because I used to send her a lot of information of like how the family separation, and and it brought memories of her residential school years or her family's residential school years. I mean, the same exact thing, and we're connecting the dots. Children being put in cages, same thing happened up there. The family separation, how they were broken, how they were broken up. So I sent her so much information, and the difference between then and now is that now, conveniently, it's not being publicized. So it's like it hasn't stopped. And we've done videos that one day hopefully we'll upload to YouTube that shows the connection from 1492 up to today, where in any given region of the hemisphere the same thing was happening, throughout, and it's no different than what happened to our northern relatives.
So we do have one question I just saw in the chat for you from Deanna Villa. She says, what about those who say that reconnecting folks are threatening Northern Native sovereignty by stating we are racially indigenous?
We actually had this conversation, right, Alejandro?
Yeah.
And one of the things I said was how, because we are protected by treaties, and treaties are law of the land, and they're actually interwoven into the Constitution, that treaties are law of the land. And a lot of Indigenous people that are federally recognized, they don't understand, and maybe some of them do, but a lot of them don't understand that it's not their CDIB that's protecting them. It's actually their treaties, and those CDIBs go back to their treaties. And to really understand the language of their treaties, and that Southern Indigenous people have treaties as well. I think you have like Treaty of Tobago, and I've been hearing some other treaties that you have. And so if they're saying that their sovereignty is being affected, how? Because I just, that would be my question. I want to know like how. Like, I'm here. I don't feel like that my sovereignty is being threatened by being here. I don't speak on behalf of the federally recognized tribe. That is, my tribe. I'm not speaking on behalf of them. I'm speaking in behalf of an individual. And I think we kind of have to move away from that thought that whatever I say is like what every Native thinks, because that's not true, right? So how is people reconnecting hurting our sovereignty? I'm not really for sure on that. And I think, though, if you were to go into the courts and you were to bring up a case, then I would humbly ask to talk to treaty lawyers. There's really good lawyers at OU. There's really good lawyers in Michigan. Talk to treaty lawyers and get to understand a lot of these. The Supreme Court right now is doing a lot of good things in favor for Indigenous people. And but if you are going to go to courts and do things, then I would make sure that if it's going to involve other tribes, to make sure that you're talking with them. But other than just bringing back your identity, I don't understand how that's affecting anything.
Right, because I was gonna.
I don't know. I would like.
I was just going to throw out there, like, the position we have on this podcast has never been one of, it's like a no benefits position. So we tell people this idea, you go back to an indigenous identity, but it's only one in the political and social sense. And as you reconnect, so you're not applying for benefits meant for traditionally indigenous people up here because they're not yours to take, especially if you're really disconnected like a mestizo would be. So that's our position. I mean, this is just what's morally right. It's going back to that identity and it's holding to that identity, but there's nothing legal about it, or there's nothing about trying to usurp anybody's like benefits or authority or tribe, or when we never tell people to claim a tribe that you obviously don't belong to. I mean, that's an obvious no-no, but so that is our clear position we've made on this podcast since the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I've always noticed people of color, whenever they're in a place, they're always really respectful. Like when I'm here, I am in the territory of the Ojibwe Nation. So I know that there are going to be people that I have to work with here because they are the caretakers of the land here, So I think I think as people of color, we tend to be very respectful of that. And so I don't understand why it's, I don't know. I would just like to say how are they explaining that it's a threat? That would be my.
And Bishkwit, I had a question. You and I talked about this, and I've had conversations with Northern natives who even question the idea of there being any real sovereignty for federally recognized tribes, because for one, they mentioned, and I would like your input on this. There's several things that they mentioned. First, they mentioned the tribal government as a tool installed by the federal government that they somehow used as a tool to also usurp traditional government or governance within nations or tribes. And then the fact that, it's like, if you really wanted to find out who's in charge, like, they look at all the people who oppose something from the federal government or stand up in defense of their life and their land. Look how they're met with police violence, with military violence, with poisoning of land violence too.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked them, I was like, so is there any real sovereignty? And that was like the big question, because people who bring up this argument, that would be my question, is like, do northern nations have true sovereignty? Because if you look up the word, I don't know if any of them are actually living or exercising, within the realm of true sovereignty.
Yeah,
you just gave us a lot of abuses.
Yeah, if there's anybody listening or anybody that does have knowledge of tribal law and would like to come on and have a conversation, I would love to hear it. I would love to hear like what they've been learning about treaty law and how they understand that, because I don't know. I think that's going to have to be probably for another time, because that's a lot of information, and I would like to have somebody on who's really knowledgeable about that, or has understandings of that, because me personally, I really don't. But I think going back and reclaiming your identity is, like you're saying, it's more of like a social thing, right? And it's not more of trying to get into the realm of like the Supreme Court and all of this other stuff, right? Like, you're just trying to go back to your identity. So I'm like,
yeah, I mean that's what me and Marcus have talked about. Like, it's like when people ask for your race, like on census or government paperwork, like when you join a job or just demographics, like you would reclaim it there. You would reclaim it with your friends, your family. You'd hold to it, and then you'd also support people that are traditionally indigenous, either with funds or just politically. Like, that's all it entails. It doesn't entail applying for any benefits or trying to get recognized by the U.S. government or any of that. Like, so it comes like, for me and Marcus, it purely comes from a good position. Like, we don't have any bad intentions in anything that we're doing.
Yeah.
Oh, my bad. I was going to say Thomas had a question. This guy named Tulsa, Oklahoma. She wanted to take it. He said, What is your take on blood quantum? I'm open to alternatives such as paternal, maternal DNA test lineage and opening up the roles to related tribes, cultures, and languages. He's also a Northern Native, but I forget which tribe he's from.
That again, this is a really contentious topic. I would like to bounce around ideas on that. It's a double-edged sword, right? We unfortunately are living in colonialism, and there is a lot of people that have a really close proximity to whiteness that are causing a lot of damage in our tribes, but they still are ancestral indigenous, right? So you've got people who may be finding an ancestor and then they're capitalizing off of that ancestor. And so this is a really contentious subject because you can understand how the blood quorum came about, to protect whatever rights we may have for our children. But on the other hand, it's also causing a lot of damage, right? And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for tribes to have, if they truly are sovereign and they truly want to exercise their sovereignty, maybe there is something within tribes to bring on indigenous relatives that are really suffering the abuses of colonialism and protecting them somehow. And I think that would be a good conversation to have. Like, how do we do that? What do we do to protect each other? So if we are given these privileges as being federal Indians or whatever, what do we do then to protect our Native brothers and sisters? And why are we so quick to be okay with people that have ancestral, some ancestor, maybe 3 generations back, that has a really close proximity to whiteness, where we okay to think that they are in rights to this federal status, but African indigenous people and Southern indigenous people are sometimes then seen as not able to have these protections. I don't understand that. And so I think that's something to really question and have a conversation about. And if we are truly sovereign and have these federal protections, and what are we doing to help each other that are, being abused by this over-encompassing evil, right? This colonialism.
I think
There's another question too, but I don't know what BQ is.
I think she blood quantum.
Blood quantum.
Oh, it's short for blood quantum.
No, tribes do lots of different things. Not blood. Like my tribe does not do blood quantum. I don't know.
Blood
They
quorum.
don't do. I know. I don't
We
know.
don't have a quorum. We agree.
Blood quarrel.
That's what we're all facing, a blood quarrel.
I know.
Bro, you just coined this really bad feud between oh my god, blood quarrel. I guess
It's intense.
it's really intense. It really is.
And it's sad though, because there is some tribes that have kicked off their own relatives because, I don't know if you guys are aware of per cap, and it's this is a whole other thing that we can talked about, and money and how money gets tied in, and that tribes are using an economic plan that whatever companies that they own, whatever profits they get, they have to split amongst the shareholders, and the shareholders are the ones that are part of their tribe, so they split it up amongst those who are in the tribe, and if they want more shares from their companies, then they are disenrolling people. So that's another thing to talk about with this. There's so many different, like you said, layers that we're having to examine. So no, there's lots of different ways that Northern tribes accept people. It's not just blood quorum. There's also lots of different things. So
I was just gonna laugh because Luis just roasted you, Marcus. He said Vasconsuelo Willows, like I usually fuck it up, dude.
I knew I'd get roasted again. I didn't even say his name this time. I still get roasted, but whatever. All right. I think we Nabishwa, did you have enough time to answer a couple more? Do you got to get going? Because if you do,
I could do a couple of more. Yeah, I just
Okay.
didn't want to start getting into the 10 o'clock time here because I have to wake up early tomorrow.
Oh no, we completely understand. I mean, whenever you have to head out, that's okay. Just let us know.
All right.
I think there's any comments about some of your people. Sorry, I can't spell it, but are fighting with water protectors about about how they do their activism.
Yeah, and this is just a lot of this is kind of a lot of the things I'm talking about is people are going to do and say what they do, right? And as long as we're moving with love in our heart and we're still trying to move forward and we're still trying to peel back these layers and realize how to help each other, the right people are going to come forward. And so really we can, talk all day about like a lot of different things, but I think that we just have to keep learning and keep peeling back these layers and keep learning how to work with each other and communicate with each other and keep doing the good work in our communities, and then things are going to start. That's just maybe me being existential, but
One thing I also noticed with some people is in this whole blood quarrel that we face is, well, anyways, there's a lot of us, that are mestizos that got completely assimilated. Like our ancestors were forcibly assimilated by force or by segregation, by genocide, by enslavement. And so in order to survive in Mexico and a lot of these other places, they shed their tribal identity and they just assimilated, and they lost that over time. And I see a lot of people that have a lot of acrimony towards mestizos for that, and they blame them and their ancestors because they're like, well, your ancestors chose to like stop being native. And I always think it's like a really callous point because it's like you're completely overlooking all the factors that made them do that, right? And I always see a lot of blame placed on us, the mestizos, our ancestors, and but no blame is ever placed on the Spanish. I never see any hate for the Spanish when it comes to these conversations, and I just think it's really messed up and it's really callous when people just don't want to understand that we're also victims of colonization and that a lot of us, our tribes were erased, and now we want to go back, pick up the pieces, and begin anew, and we're just villainized basically. So that's another thing I've noticed. What do you think about that?
I see a question about the freedmen. I think that definitely needs to be another time we talk. And there's some people that I know on Instagram that should come on here because that's a similar plight, right? A lot of these people are not being recognized as Indigenous people. And the thing of it is Cherokee. I just heard a podcast with Giassi Ross, and so the Cherokees, Choctaws, the civilized tribes, right? They were slave owners, and so like the slave owning men would marry the indigenous women, and then the children would inherit the land from the women, and then they would inherit the slaves from their father, right? And so that's how I'm understanding it from a podcast, and it's a really it's a really contentious thing with a lot of people, but the facts are the facts is that when the Civil War was fought and the slaves were free, then the Cherokees were supposed to have amicable relationships or good relationships with the people, and they were supposed to work with each other, and they were supposed to take care of each other. And if they're not doing that, then they're not upholding what they said they would do. And the Cherokees, Choctaws, Chickasaws, anything that they're doing to not carry their promises that they said they would do, then they're being anti-Black, and that's not right. And that's how I'm going to be on that. And I think that we need to have our African Indigenous people maybe on here because that's the same plight that they're having, because they're phenotypically away, and there's a lot of anti-Blackness in our communities. And I think this conversation needs to come up, and they do need to be taken care of. And they they are a part of their community because they're what helped build those nations, right? So I would suggest everybody go and listen to that podcast. It was called Break Dances with Wolves, and it was with Giassi Ross, and they have a whole podcast on the freedmen and the history of the indigenous people who owned slaves. It was a really, really ugly part of American Indian history and what is happening now to these people and why they're not being recognized. And that's another good thing that probably should be on here, that we talk to with each other and how we make sure that they're a part of our circle as well, right?
No, definitely. We'd love to have them here.
Yeah, I think if everyone else wrapped up their questions, I guess I did have one final question for you, Bishkwe, and that was just like, you grew up in Oklahoma, right?
Yeah.
How was life growing up there? Because I only remember Oklahoma as kind of like a drive-through. Like I was going from Illinois to Texas, stopped in Oklahoma. I looked around. I just kept on driving. No offense to anyone that lives there. I'm sure it's a beautiful state, but was it? How would you describe like your experience like there? Was I mean
I
compared to
love Oklahoma.
Wisconsin? Sorry.
I love Oklahoma. I think it's everything that made me what I am. There is a lot of lots of different ideologies there. I hope that people are starting to learn to love each other and realize there's a lot of like conservative indigenous people there. I hope they start
Sure.
to take those layers off and start to become a part of the circle and uplifting this indigenous global movement, right? But yeah, I loved Oklahoma. My family's there. I love it. I'll always love it. I don't think that was the first time in lifetimes that we've been in Oklahoma, and it gave us a home after the Trail of Death and the Trail of Tears, and
Yeah.
it's just, I don't know. That's how I personally feel about it. So
Yeah, no, that's great that you love your home state and whatnot. I know that there were like during the Trail of Tears. It's always crazy how there were so many indigenous native people that were forced out of their homes in the eastern part of the United States and forced to go all the way to Oklahoma. Um, I don't think
yeah,
that's
well, I'll
covered
tell you
enough.
what, the Cherokees were anti-black, and it sure didn't stop them from getting their butts kicked down the Trail of Tears, did it? So I guess it's not a good thing to do historically, and it's probably not a good thing to do now, right? Oh, it's not a good thing to do now. So let that be a reminder that being anti-black, anti-whatever, and carrying that type of hate towards people who are not probably phenotypically or coming from different walks of life or having the expectations of what you think they have, that's still not going to protect you from colonization, right? So it's something to think about.
Right. I mean, I see some people like that. Apparently it's a touchy subject, which I just don't see why it's so touchy to some people. But in the live chat, but it's important to have these people on our platform to talk about this because there's a whole lot of nuances that we're missing when it just comes to commenting about it, like in the live chat or just making these assumptions. So I think it's very important to have those guests on, like what you were mentioning.
Can I ask Mbishkwe
Yeah,
a question
and I
before
would
we
really
leave?
suggest people to. I would really suggest people to listen to Giassi Ross in the podcast Break Dances with Wolves and really get a clear understanding, because this isn't up for the tribes what they need to do. This is what they said they would do. They said they would take care of those people. This is documented, and it's actually. So go and listen to that podcast and then come back and kind of really think about how you feel about it then, because I used to feel like that too, and I was brought up really with a lot of different thinkings, and we have every right to hold on to whatever we want to feel, but just know that after a while, you have to start really taking into considerations and what you're leaving out of your life when you decide to hold on to some things. It's going to make your life really bland if you keep in your box.
Mbishkwe, I had a question for you because we've talked about this. If you can share with us either from your personal experience and what you've seen on a more general level among your communities, your people, or other Northern Natives as to how did Northern Natives forget to recognize Southern Natives as relatives? How did they get there? And if it's too long of a question, maybe we could save that for another show.
Yeah, I think we need to save it for another show. I think we're setting up for other shows because I think there's intersectionality in a lot of different things that we talked about here, and this should set you guys up for like other podcasts. It would be great if you guys could have Alejandro connect you to me, and I can give you some names of some people, and you can have them on here and have a podcast with them. That would be really good. I'd like to listen to it. So yeah, I think that would be great for the future.
Certainly, like our guest list was starting to run a little dry, so that's good. Yeah, we definitely want more people on here that can help shed light on these issues, and that can get everybody closer to understanding each other.
Yeah, that's all it's about, right? Is coming together, and whatever I said, if you feel that like whatever I said, I apologize if you feel that I'm not being fair. But I just really want to make sure everybody feels inclusive and that they're becoming a part of the circle need each other. We really, really, really need each other, and we need each other's gifts and what we have to offer. And whatever we do to each other here, we have to all remember we have ancestors over there as well. And so you have to think to yourself, how would their grandma feel? How were their great grandparents felt? Because they suffered just like our elders suffered, our ancestors suffered, and they wanted us to be here just as much, you know. So take that into consideration when you say things about to people. Like, how does that make their ancestors feel who suffered just as much as our ancestors did? And how do we, you know, how are we communicating with each other? Would you say that to them? You know, take that into consideration. And that's all I'm trying to say here. I'm not trying to hurt people or make them. I'm just trying to take into consideration how can we do things to be more inclusive of each other, and would we say those things to their grandmother? You know.
That's a good point, and that answers that earlier question I had for you. That line, would you say the same thing to those ancestors that suffered all those horrible things and were victims? You know, would you say that to their face? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, again, you know, and Bishwe, we'll have to have you on again sometime because we really enjoyed everything, and I wasn't trying to insult Oklahoma or anything like that. I was just like going through. I'm sure it's a beautiful state, but yeah. If anyone had anything else, and sorry. Oh, I don't think anyone had any other questions. So yeah, Bishwe, again, like, thank you again for coming on, and it was a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, you're most welcome back.
Yeah, always.
All right, and get in contact so I can give you those names. And nice to meet you guys. Have a good evening. Bye.
You too.
You too.
I'll see you.
Thank you. And then there were three.
Alejandro, right. So you already know we're still about to go for a while, right?
Oh, I know how you guys roll. I was gonna joke with her. I was like, "Hey, I don't know if you read the fine print, but these guys like to go for 2 to 3 hours."
Yeah.
I mean, and there's still stuff to discuss, man. So yeah, we'll still be. You keep going for a while, Alejandro. It's good to have you on. You were our first guest on this channel. For those of y'all that didn't realize, so.
Really?
You're the first guest we ever had, dude. You're the OG, bro. you're the OG, man. The OG Indigenous podcast guest, man. Like I was like, we were thinking about that early on. We're like, man, you know, we need to have Alejandro back on here. You're their first fucking guest, and we haven't even had him back. So
yeah, I miss you guys. You know, it was cool being on with you, and I didn't know I was the first one. So that's, you know, I'm gonna take that as a very, very a high honor because I really like what you guys are doing. You know, meeting you all when we first met through like social media on Facebook, and just seeing fresh people, new people who are going to take this further, and you guys are doing a podcast about this. You know, when we started tackling the whole identity thing on your podcast, and I watched some of your shows after that. And you've all like gotten in contact with some really, really good people who've shared a lot of really beautiful experiences and very, very helpful information. So like, congratulations to you guys, and don't stop. Definitely. And I don't think you will, but I know on this road you're gonna meet, you know, you're gonna hit some obstacles, and it's all about superseding obstacles. You're going around them, seeing that there's always a way, you know. So congratulations to you guys. I'm really glad you're keeping it up, and you know, anytime you need anything, just I'd be more than happy to help out in some way. So it's great to be with you all.
No, definitely, man. You know, I remember I reached out to you a couple of days ago where I was just kind of feeling down because, like, yeah, we get a lot of positivity and a lot of support and people that believe in what we're saying, but we also get the opposition that's really loud and really vicious, you know, towards us. So sometimes, like, I feel dismayed. Sometimes I feel like, you know, sometimes it's like, you know, should I really have started the podcast? Sometimes I'll rethink that. But ultimately, I think it's a good thing, and it's something that's necessary.
Here we go with confessions of re-indigenizing Native. You know, it's like I've been there too, man. So many times, you know. And you read articles where even in Mexico, where you'll be dismissed, or you'll be called a Chicano, or you'll be called as a foreigner. But that's because, you know, again, the colonization went in every direction, you know, and They give credence to the borders, the apartheid borders. They're giving credence to that division and separation that was embedded in all of our psyches, where we see it now. We don't even question it because we think it's normal, and that's the way we were raised. Is we were raised within that reality, that box. So we don't even know that there's another box we can step out into, or step out of it and see everything for what it is. But I've been there too, and I've been confronted, physically, physically as in like up front, where people are hit you up. So what tribe are you from? And I knew where they were coming from, and I'd be like, and just to throw them off and get them upset, throw a wrench in their little strategy, I would say, "Oh, I'm Chicano, man," and they're like, "What? That's not a tribe." Well, guess what? It is now. All right, dude. I was like, "This is my continent, man, and I can call myself whatever I want." Now, if they come at a different way, those elders over in Virginia, or was it North Carolina, the Chickahominy, they're like, "Hey, where are you from?" You could already tell that they were coming from a really good place, a very inclusive, inviting place, and they genuinely wanted to know. And I said, instead of trying to like drop the name of some tribe that didn't exist or whatever, I just said, "Look, I'm from South Texas. My ancestors are from South Texas, and another part of them are from Central Mexico. Sometimes we call ourselves Coahuilteca or Yuecopila, or and from Central Mexico, I really can't say who, what people I belong to, but." And they're like, "Oh, that's cool. You know what? We got Mexican blood. We got Southern Native blood." It's like, so, yeah, don't get swayed, because you know what? Every time you get swayed, you're going to meet 10 more people who are in your favor, who are in favor of collaboration and cooperation and coming together. That's who we are. That's what it's about. And human beings, they drift towards that, There's going to be some haters, but let them keep hating, man. You know what? They're just shutting the closing door on themselves more than anything,
Here's what I love. I love the haters that are like, that really, despise our channel, but they'll show it with their friends, and then they'll watch our lives and our videos. You'll be like, you're only helping us. Like,
I mean, we literally get money from you guys watching, by the way. Just gonna throw that out there.
Yeah.
If you want to take it out on us, smash that like button down there and just punch it, man.
Shit,
So
even
don't
the
forget to
comments
subscribe.
even the comments that are hating on us, even the dislikes, all of that still benefits the channel because they push it further up,
It's
and
fuel.
we get more.
It's interaction. Yeah.
So
you know what? There's some of them are cringing right now. Some of them are having aneurysms, and there's some others that might be having a heart attack or two. Let them. That's their problem. We're looking at a bigger picture. We're not looking at this colonial version of how things should remain.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. Yeah, it's just silly, and like some of them, like it's just like, bro, like why, like if you hate us so much, why are you spending hours of your time just watching our content? Like, don't you think there's something off with you if you're doing that? Like, you should just not watch.
Yeah, it's a mild, I don't even know if it's mild, but it's literally a mental illness. If you're going to spend that much time despising someone,
obsessing over them, like I'm just gonna watch 3 hours of their content. Like every time they pull something out, I'm gonna watch it all, and then I'm just gonna go and blast them and be like, oh, it's like, bro,
I'm gonna go record a podcast against them. I'm gonna get them on my podcast. I'm gonna do a video on these guys. I hate them.
Yeah, it's like, dude, like it's like you can do all that, but we're not gonna go anywhere. Like, I mean,
you love us, and we will live in your heart. Hate us, we will live in your head. Either way, we're gonna occupy space somewhere in you. So,
as I always say,
and don't try to charge us rent for living in your head because you hate us.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. But yeah, it's ridiculous. But I'm glad you were able to give me some advice, man, because you've been doing this for a hell of a lot longer. So that was nice to get.
Yeah, stick it out, man, and declare it to yourself. That's where the real change begins, man. Is when you get up and you look at yourself in the mirror, or you talk to yourself, you connect with yourself, and you remind yourself who you are. because like there's so many people that were hurt, whose memories were erased beyond recognition, but there's a large contingent of us who are beginning to remember, you know and we don't realize, and because of that we don't realize that we are a majority, and we're finding that out thanks to like the technological tools that we're using. you know we're finding out that we've been lied to, and we were programmed to think that we were this insignificant, weak, and powerless minority. So it's a matter of time bringing all these people who are recovering from that amnesia, you know and that's all we want. It's like we're trying to help people. We're not there to, like, once they climb up the hill, we're going to beat you down, watch you try to roll down the hill. It's like how, especially if they're native people, we get that from white people, we get that from Europeans, we get that from other people, but when it's our own people trying to take you down, that's proof that colonization worked, at least in them. It's like they can't stand back and analyze themselves in the situation that they're trying to put themselves in. Like the story of Three Billy Goats Gruff. They're trying to cross the bridge, and there was the troll underneath the bridge that always tried to keep the goats from crossing over. Well, that's exactly what these people are doing. They're trolls under the bridge, because our people are trying to cross that bridge to leave colonization, at least in their minds. And that's a first step, is like recognizing yourself and knowing who you are, because it's remembering who you are to know who you are. Because we can't get caught up in that whole illusion of like, oh, I'm gonna find myself, because yourself has always been within there. So it's like we're gonna meet these trolls trying to cross the bridge. They're trying to scare you from crossing. Oh, don't you dare make it to the other side. You're not going to cross over. How dare you call yourself Native American? It's like, what did they do? You know what? They unified and they butted him and kicked the troll out.
I remember we were having a conversation, like, where you're using this analogy, and we were saying, instead of calling them gatekeepers, we should just call them bandits and brigands.
Yeah. Yeah, you're trying to make it across a barren desert. You're starving, and the water's at the other end of the desert, and that's what's going to keep you alive. And that's how we see identity today. It's like when you realize that you're Native American, it sets off an unstoppable cycle of events in your mind, or you eventually will come around to wanting to reclaim this continent as your homeland, and realizing who you are and who the other people who are not from here, who they are, and what their purpose is here, to take your resources and your land and live off of it. So it's like you're trying to cross that desert because the oasis is out there on the other side, the greener pastures at the end of the desert, and here come these bandits from out of nowhere to try and take you down, and you're like, hey man, they look just like me, what's going on? Why don't we
these freaking bandits on horses, bro.
Yeah, a bunch of marauders, man. Like, you can't cross this desert. How dare you get to the other side? How dare you want to drink water? How dare you want to call yourself Native American? It's like shut up. Take that mask off. Go back to where you came from, man. It's like, get out of our way. You're acting foolish. It's childish.
I did want to make one thing, Poncho. I know you said that we were running dry on the guest. I think like with northern people from the north, maybe we are running a little bit dry. But I just want to make sure, because we do have people that are watching that do want to be on the channel. We do have some guests still.
Oh, look, guys, like don't get offended. Like, Marcus is like the HR. He's the one that schedules the guests on. I'm kind of like the more technical side. So don't get triggered by that.
You're letting them know of our responsibilities. It's supposed to be secret.
Oh yeah, it's supposed to be secret roles, bro.
These are proprietary.
Yeah, dude. Like, every time somebody wants to be on the podcast, I'm just like, oh, can you like reach out to Marcus so he can set you up? That's how it usually goes.
Yeah, but I wanted to add something when gosh dang it, when she was on, Bishkoi was on, was that like those that do want to like gatekeep us, like and especially me as an adoptee, like I no longer want to say that I'm a Hispanic, and I refuse to say I'm a mestizo of the mestizaje culture. I see myself as native, and if you're going to stop me, then I'm sorry, but you're going to be run over, and that's the end of the story. I'm not going to subscribe to the colonial ideology that is mestizaje and Latinidad. Like
And you have
anyone.
that right to. We all do. When we realize that those are miscategorizations. It's branding. You know, just like what Europeans did with people from Africa that they brought here and enslaved. They called them the N word. They called them every detestable name you can think of, every detestable term. Why? To lower their station in life, to make them feel inferior, weak, and make them, program them with that mentality. In other words, like spiritually and mentally break them, apart from the physical breaking that they endured too. Same thing with us. We've been branded. And why? To lower our station in life. So when you realize you're Native American, it's like, well, Hispanic means somebody from Spain or having to do with Iberian Peninsula. Latin comes from the Roman Empire, now Italy, the Latin languages. That's not from here, and you're like, so that means I'm Native American, and I'm going to put two and two together. That means that my people are from here. This continent is my homeland. I'm not from anywhere else. And these white people are from Europe. And I found out that they took my land. My ancestors endured rape, theft, and torture so that these people could take the resources and live a good life off of it for the most part. And they're still doing it. Like, hey guys, maybe we should take our land back. Maybe we should fight for it. It sets a process in motion, and they don't want that to happen. So they need to keep us all divided with these brands, branding you as a criminal, as an outsider, as a terrorist, as a foreigner, as a Hispanic, as a Latino, so you cannot join the large population of the greater family of indigenous, or Native American people of the Western Hemisphere. And we all have that right. There's not even a single law in the books in the United States that can compel you to identify by anything specifically. They just try to make you, they curb your behavior, through social programming, or soft threats, or they'll do it for you.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I wanted to just, someone left a comment saying, no, wait, what was I referring to about gatekeeping? Oh boy. So, gatekeeping, essentially gatekeeping, in my opinion, is usually a form of like not allowing us to say that we're native, or because they think it's, we're impeding on their rights, or, you know,
Yeah,
just
they're doing
something.
this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's valid gatekeeping, like, with people like the Abacentrics, that's valid
Sure.
gatekeeping. And I think, but when it's misdirected against us, I think it's like banditry.
Yeah,
It's not gay, it's banditry, bro.
yeah, it's the
Or
troll
they're
under the
called
bridge.
settlers. Yeah. Or someone likes to call us settlers too.
I mean,
So,
everybody, whether they're, all brown people, we're all being, the major gatekeeping or trolling is coming from Europeans, but then we try to copy the same behavior against our own. It's like, why would people find that in their favor to uphold colonial divisions, European imposed divisions? It's because of that foolish thinking. These poor lost souls think that it's like, in order for them to win, or their community to win, everyone else has to suffer and they have to lose, when this could be a win-win situation. And people are going to gravitate to that more, than anything.
Right. People are going to naturally gravitate towards the side that's inclusive, that's positive, that's warm, right? That's full of love and positivity, rather than the side that's just full of negativity and hate and, all of the all these just that blood quarrel thing, like where we're coining a lot of new terms in this podcast.
Yeah.
Blood quarrel, banditry, so
Trolling.
yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's just been a problem, man. But we'll just continue doing what we do. We believe in what we have to say. I mean, what I've said to Marcus, and I know you gave your perspective, which you can give it here, is like we're also open, like we're always open to any option possible. So I mean, I've done polls like for what if there's going to be like an alternative racial category, which some people are for, some people are not for that. But I mean, that's always an interesting idea that I'm always willing to hear people out on as well. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Okay,
Yeah.
so about the poll.
Yeah, because we had some polls here on our channel, like, because we were like saying, well, if we ever did want to compromise with the opposition, like, and had a new racial category, like, it was just like a hypothetical situation, right? I put out some polls and I was like, what color would you guys like to identify with? And I put like brown, copper, bronze. And most people chose brown. And then I was like, would you guys support that, like, as a new category, a racial category on the census? And 65% of people said yes, 35% said no. So I was just kind of seeing where people's heads were. I thought that was interesting, though. Like, I always like polling people and seeing what they think.
That's interesting because if you said 65%, I guess in statistics, when you do a poll, you're taking a sample to get an idea of what the greater whole is,
Right.
So 65%. If you did this repeatedly in other atmospheres, how many 65% or more would you get? So what you have there, my opinion or my observation could be that these 65% people, they know they're Native American, but they're still not ready to claim it. So they're like, we're gonna play it safe. We're gonna say brown, what we deal with, like with brown continent and ID Native, is like strategy. We have to realize that we're in a war. We have to realize that the war has been ongoing since Columbus set foot, since he invaded our continent, and all the other Europeans that came. It was a wave of colonization through invasion. We've talked about it repeatedly. I'm sure you all have touched on the subject that all the injustices, the rape, the theft, and the murder has not stopped. Like, for instance, one example is when Columbus invaded, he kidnapped 9-year-old girls and sold them off to his captains and other soldiers. That was the very beginning of the sex trade in the Western Hemisphere. Now we have today missing and murdered indigenous women. And I have the same reports from friends in Bolivia and Peru and Colombia, how women and children are being trafficked up and down the entire continent. Mexico and Tlaxcala is a huge spot for that too. So it hasn't stopped. We're at war, and war is being waged against us in many forms. So when you're at war, you're on the battlefield. Not everybody can, this is not a question of like, well, I think this is right and I think this is right. You get thousands of people with their own answer thinking that that's a correct way. Somebody has to take some leadership roles and guide the people and give them a strategy and a code of conduct when you're at war. There's a certain way you must conduct yourself. So like what the strategy that we encourage is use the term Native American. If you aren't Black, if you're not Asian, if you're not white, that means what? What else is left is Native American. Okay. When we say brown, the admin of Brown Continent said, well, we talked about this before. He said, well, brown, he said, the majority of people, all indigenous people across the earth are brown in one shade or another, He said, so that's like using the term indigenous, unless we use it specifically. It's like everybody is indigenous to one part of the world or the other. But when we say we're Native American, we tell in less than 3 seconds, I'm Native American. We can tell millions of people in less than 3 seconds who we are racially, and automatically they know where we come from. Oh, the Western Hemisphere. that goes without saying. American Indian or Native American. And we know that Native American is not correct, but that's what millions of people know. And the classification of race is what millions and billions of people worldwide know. So we have to use those tools at our disposal for the time being. And it is not to erase or forget who we are originally in our respective languages and traditions. Not about that. This is a strategy to bring in the millions of people who are misidentifying themselves because they still have yet to come around and remember who they are. So yes, I agree with brown. Yes, we are brown from up and down, from Patagonia to Alaska. But specifically on a worldwide scale, it's like we're Native American, the original people or indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere.
I actually like Native American better than just indigenous, in my opinion. That's just me though, and I think it's just really recognizable, like what you say. It registers like that, right? So that's why I like it. It was interesting. I ran into this guy that opposed us, saying that we were indigenous unless you had a tribe. However, he agreed with calling each other Native American if you had no tribe, which I thought was interesting. But it seemed like he was following more along the lines of down south of the border. Indígena has like a really specific connotation. So that's why he thought just calling himself Native American was better than just going, instead of just saying Indígena. So I just thought that was really interesting because he agrees to an extent. But that was the first time I had somebody in the opposition that's like, no, you can't be indigenous, but you're Native American. I was like, that's interesting that you you have that specific viewpoint. So I respect it though.
No, that's good. And again, we just want to reiterate, we're not trying to be correct, and we're not trying to say that is the correct way to refer to us. It's a strategy, and it's a temporary strategy to win the information war against us. When you have thousands of people trying to say that, no, you should say this, or this is the way to do it, it's like, okay, but what is the solution at the end of your declaration? Do you have a solution? What is your strategy? We're specific on this. This is a temporary strategy. And what is the solution? Everybody's saying land back, but it's like, how are you going to do it? We're not organized. Everybody's running around in every single direction, calling each other out, trying to put each other down, or trying to say that this is the word you have to use. Don't say this or don't say that. But sadly, this is the reality that surrounds us right now, and we use this as a solution. It's like Native American; it carries a lot of weight, and even American Indian. I just saw a comment pop up right now that we're not from India, but some of the information I read, some of the documents, it's like what we know as India today was called Hindustan back when Columbus invaded, and Indian comes from Indio or Indios, and Indios comes from Sin Dios. I've only been able to find one reference to that on the internet from somebody in South America, but it's what they're saying. People want documented bibliographical, information. It has to be on a paper somewhere, and again, it's like, what if this is oral tradition? So sin Dios is without God. In other words, they were calling us godless heathens.
Right. What's interesting is next time I have a Lakota guy on, I'm going to have him break it down because he was agreeing with you and saying that back in the day, India wasn't called India, it was something else. So he says that his opinion was he doesn't agree with the whole rhetoric of Indian is wrong because we're not from India. He had a different opinion that lined up more with yours, which I found interesting. I thought it was kind of it took me through a loop. I didn't expect that from him.
Yeah, and that was like the first case of branding right there. The godless heathens, los sin Dios, those without God. We got to kill them. If we can't Christianize them, we got to take them. They're godless heathens. We can take their land. They don't believe in God. Again, using any excuse they can to justify to themselves that this was all for the taking because we were not like them, and they were not like us.
I was going to say, I will, Marcus, are you still here?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. I'll be right back, bro. I gotta run the restroom, bro. Be right back.
I'm gonna take a break too. I'll be right back.
No.
Oh, Marcus, you're gonna have to entertain the guests, bro. You're gonna have to entertain the guests, man.
Sure, no worries.
What did you do today? I'll be back.
Okay. Hey, y'all. So it's just me right now. I'm more than happy to answer anyone's questions. So first of all, before I answer any, if anyone does have any, thank y'all for coming on. We got like 50 people, 49 people that are watching, so it's pretty neat. Oh, someone said sorry. I mean, it's cool. I feel like I've been in this situation before. But yeah, we have a lot of things planned for the future. We do have a lot of guests that are coming on. A lot of really cool people I think you guys will like. And to those that are watching that I said for you to come on, like, please, well, first, thank you for your patience. But, we do have a lot of other things that, go on in our lives. But we will get you on to those that are watching. And then anyone that ever wants to come on, we have the stream link posted in there if you want to come on and talk to us. We're more than happy to. Don't forget, we also have a Discord as well. I have an email set up, indigenouspodcast@gmail.com, I believe. I think there's some numbers in that, but y'all can find it in the description of our channel. So yeah, if anyone ever has anything, what someone says the ceiling fan in your life is blinding. Yeah, sure. Maybe that's better now. Sorry about that, but thank you for telling me. So, yeah, I think I did my talking, and I'm going to shut up and let y'all speak. I was just telling them about like how we have some cool guests coming on, and we got the Discord and the email if anyone ever wants to contact us. We have the live stream posted, so anyone's welcome to join. If you're a hater that's watching and you want to argue with us, come on, we're ready to battle.
Right. Yeah. If you're a hater, fine. Yeah. Come on in. I was going to say, just to throw this out there on the Discord, because we had some drama on the Discord. Discord is not really a place we're going to sit here and debate, because me and Marcus have like personal lives, bro. We don't have unlimited time to be debating people. Like YouTube comment sections for the debate, and whenever we open it up for haters, it's for the debate, not the Discord. So if you don't agree with us, don't join the Discord.
Yeah, do not join the Discord. Hey, I think
you'll just get banned immediately.
Yeah, if you don't want to show your face, that's cool. You can join audio. No worries. We welcome it. But yeah, going back though to the Discord, yeah, if you disagree with a lot of what we have to say on the channel, I'm not sure why you decided to join the Discord. I mean, if you're gonna try and change our minds and make us think that we're all mestizos or Hispanos, then you came to the wrong Discord, my friend.
You're a wrong place for that.
Like what I've said too is like, for a lot of, because what I've realized is that we just have, with the haters, we just have two irreconcilable worldviews where we think that having the blood and DNA and being a race is what matters, especially because a lot of us did lose the culture, right? Because of assimilation. And the opposite side think it's all about culture, generally speaking. So we're not going to see eye to eye. It's going to be very hard to give, you can't really convince the other side, yeah, you're completely wrong. So we're going to have our disagreements and we just have to live with that. Or number two, if you're going to come, don't waste your time, present a solution that would work as a middle ground that you could sell it to everybody. That's a challenge I issue to the haters. Present a middle ground solution that would be acceptable to most people. That's what your time would be better spent for, than rather than just, we're going to repeat the same old lines over and over and over again. We're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, we have to make, the only way we're going to survive is making this a win-win situation, or as a whole, we can make this a win-win situation, or we remain isolated and we end up losing. And sadly, these people who have this mental illness, they would rather stay in that colonial state of mind, that exclusive, isolationist, members only club, and it doesn't have to be that way. It's like you really need to wrap your head around, just get out of that mental illness state, stop thinking like that, and learn to love yourself and embrace and love your people.
Someone left an interesting comment that I wanted to highlight. This channel trips me out we basically agree that race is real and not a construct like most leftists agree. Yet we disagree with right-wing nationalism at the same time. I anyone want to respond to that before I do?
Marcus, you take it ahead. Well, what before we even tackle that, Rob and Doan Keck were saying it's both culture and blood, and it's just like, I mean, we've rehashed it with you guys both. Like, well, you, Rob, I mean, we've hashed this out so many times, bro. Like, your stance is that mestizos can't reconnect if there's no tribe to go back to. We just disagree with there, bro. We're not really convinced each other either way. We can argue about it all day, but we're not going to get anywhere.
You know, for all intents and purposes, for the people who are beginning to remember who they are, let's just stick to the racial genetic blood category and realize, I mean, if it quacks like a duck, looks like a duck, and flies like a duck, then it must be a duck. Same thing with our people. It's like, if I look at you guys, it's like, he must not be black, obviously. He must not be white. They're not Asian. What does that leave? They're Native American by blood, by genes, you know, and their look, I mean, their phenotype.
Yeah, and I like this comment too that someone said the Mexican government uplifted mestizaje. I mean, Jose Vasconcelos also said that, and like that to create like a unifier identity under Mexican nationality, pretty much, and see how powerful and successful it was. I mean, like this is what we're like battling right now, is that, you know, pro mestizaje. Oh, someone's on.
Yeah, but
terminology.
who did it benefit? It benefited the criollos to maintain their nation of Mexico, which is stolen native land, and the subjugation of the people who would not give in and still live within their respective indigenous communities.
We do have a guest on. Karina. Oh, someone joined from the comments. Nice to have you join.
Thank you. I was told to join. I thought somebody else was going to join. I got tricked.
Dang.
You're on.
Yeah, I can see through my computer also.
Karina, thanks for coming on. If you don't mind me asking, where did you say you're from Illinois?
No, I'm like from as in where I was born or where I'm currently living.
Oh, you can say where you're born and like what state you're at.
I was born in Monterrey, Mexico, and I'm living close to Houston, Texas.
Oh, okay. Very cool. I always wanted to explore Houston. Looked like a very nice place to live.
No, it's not.
No? Okay.
No, it's hella ghetto.
Well, maybe I'll reconsider that.
Yeah, and it floods a lot too. So.
Yeah, I heard about the recent flooding, and there's hurricanes going on around like southern Texas, I think, or is it Alabama, Mississippi? But yeah. So what? I'm kind of curious, Karina. You follow our? We see your comments on our channel and whatnot. So, what makes you like what we say, our content? I guess you just agree with a lot of what we have to produce.
Well, first of all, she says that she hates me, so there's that.
Oh.
Yeah, I did not say that. I'm just trolling.
Yeah, I know. I'm just fucking with you.
What I like about y'all's videos is I literally agree with literally almost everything. I experience literally what Juan talks about. I experienced through the same thing. You know, coming out, like reconnecting and reclaiming my indigenous side has opened up a lot of racism through my family, who are literally mostly claim their Espanol side. And I'm already getting called as like la niña de los pueblos, or like my kids, you know, they're brown because of their dad. You know, I let them run around almost butt naked outside, and you know, they like to play with dirt, and my mom would tell me like, oh, mira los niños de los pueblos, se parecen de los pueblos, pobres niños. and stuff like that. It really hurts to hear stuff like that because it's something new. Like I never heard of something like that coming out of like my own family's mouth. So yeah.
Yeah, Juanchelo and I talk about, and maybe Alejandro, you can add on to this, that like how we are unfortunately taught a lot of racism. Well, I wasn't, but a lot of people in Mexico and Central America were taught a lot of racism at a young age by, unfortunately, by parents and elders. So like, again, the term, or what's it called? Like, don't be an Indio, or just other things as far as like, your darker skin is not so good, things like that. Alejandro, I think you're going to say something.
Oh no, I'm sorry, just coughed.
Oh, you're good. I'm sorry, take your mic off.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, I've seen that some in my own family, although not a whole lot, but it's been in the past, comments like, so they're speaking their language and they're like, and, just comments like, oh, it just sounds so ugly or whatever. And I've always thought those were weird comments because I'm just like, no, I disagree. It sounds cool as fuck that they can speak this entire indigenous language. And they would mislead because, like, I don't know why people in Mexico call it dialecto instead of just calling it another indigenous language, which I think is weird. It's not a dialecto. It's not a dialect. It's a completely new language. But whenever I heard that, I always thought it was like really neat that people like knew these alternate languages. I was like, wow. But yeah, I've seen that before, like the self-hatred in our own communities, with the whole, just using it as insult, like indios, and it's like, I've always gotten that. Always tripped me out when I was younger. I always thought that was weird.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I wish I understood a little bit more because I came from a different experience because I was adopted and I lived a much more different community than a lot of people probably that follow, this channel and everyone, on the panel too. But it is interesting to learn it from an adoptive perspective, about how life is, around here. But yeah, it's, I think that the people that are very much like pro Latinidad, really look at the native identity and those like reclaiming as something that almost seems impossible, or it's just like they look at it as something in the past. That's what I've noticed on like Latinidad and people that are very much for like mestizaje culture. That is how they view it, and that's what I've seen. Karina, you said that you agreed with like almost everything that with the channel. Was there anything that you disagreed on? We'd love to know.
No, not really, but I did want to like point out about Latinidad because I recently just had a conversation with my aunt from Mexico, and she told me that Latinidad doesn't even exist in Mexico, and she's not the only one who said this. Like I met a Quiche person who's from Guatemala. She told me the same thing. I told her if she identified herself as Latina, and she told me, no, what is that? Like, I never heard of that. So, like, I feel like Latinidad, it only exists in the United States. I never, like, they always tell me that it doesn't exist in Mexico. It doesn't exist in Guatemala either. So I feel like it's literally just like the United States, the Hispanics or whatever, they're the ones who are, like, always rebranding us. Like Telemundo and Univision, like they're the only ones who talk about Latinidad.
Now that you think about, talk about that, that actually kind of makes sense because, we have a lot of media outlets that are also like very much pro Latinidad. Here in the United States, there's certain channels that are out there that praise, Latinidad, but they're American, so-called Hispanics that do this, and not so much of people from Central and South America. So I can see where you're coming from, Karina, from that point of view.
On that note, when you look into that media corporation, Me Too, if you look up their board members or look at the owners and creators, they're white, and they're the ones pushing this whole Latinos do this. In other words, they're programming you. Also as a marketable commodity. They're like, in other words, as a demographic, Latinos do this. Latinos drink Coca-Cola. Latino this, Latino that. And But the whole Latin thing comes from a few Frenchmen who in the 1830s created the concept of Latin America, you know, so that they could oppose, it was the French model using the term Latin America to oppose the English America, the Spanish America, or make it, its own part of the Western Hemisphere. And this is when Maximilian, was installed also by the French, the emperor, and it was and it was ever since then that people began to refer to themselves, or they begin to impose this whole Latin race because you're from their so-called Latin America. So that was the creation of two Frenchmen in the 1830s. But yes, I think Karina makes a very good point. Where we hear it more is here in the United States, and again, with a huge influx of Southern natives here in the United States. I remember when they wouldn't, I remember when before they had like Spanish-speaking Spanish ads on the radio or on television. Everywhere you go now, they're another demographic where they see more money that can be made from another resource to tap. Banks and car dealerships are advertising, just bring in this or bring in that. You don't need to have this. We'll sell to you. Come bank with us. It's like to all the Latinos, now it's a big unifying factor for all brown people who speak Spanish, all native people who speak Spanish, to reel them in. And at the same time, people like me too are defining, they're using the whole Latino thing as a unity thing, as a unity branding to rope us all into one category. So it's like, and then they make the mistakes, Latinos eat tortillas, it's like, no, it's like Southern Native Americans, and even in the Southwest, have always eaten tortillas in one form or another. It's a native food. So they're truly confusing the issue, to throw people off and keep them embracing that Latino banner. And a lot of people embrace it because they don't know what else to embrace.
And here's the issue.
Yeah, there's no way they would want to embrace Native American. I've read a lot of articles where these people, it's like, yeah, I'm whitewashed, but don't make fun of me for using Latinx or whatever, things like that.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I want to say, welcome, Diana. You've joined the panel.
Yes, hi everyone. I just want to say I love these discussions that we're having.
Well, we love that you join and you leave comments. I mean, it's great for everyone. Everyone gets to learn, and thank you for that. It means a lot.
Right, like it's always uplifting to see your comments on the live. Your perspective, the fact that you agree with a lot of everything, because we also get bombarded with negativity, so it does help us. Just gonna say that. Although I was expecting like actual like haters to join in, and like that's the energy I was ready for, bro. Well, we appreciate you joining.
Oh man, their mom told them to go to bed. It's 10 p.m., dog.
My gosh, man. I mean, like we even had Alejandro here, bro. He was perfect for it, man.
Yeah, and Alejandro, I wanted to add on to what you said about Latino, and unfortunately, I know a lot of people around the world, and their view of like Latino is kind of like a stereotype of anyone that is like brown and has black hair. They view as like Latino, and they assume all these stereotypes about us. Like, oh, like you said, Alejandro, like, oh, you like tacos. And like all these other things, you like to dance, and it's really the anthropologists and these historians that think that they know more about us than we do really manage to leave a dent in who we are as Native people. If that makes sense.
Yeah, they did. I mean, it's a psychological and mental and spiritual dent, and where these people will fight to embrace that native, or that Latin or Latino identity, because of the Hispanic names and surnames that are imposed. When you hear, instead of hearing Latin, you hear Latino, and put a ring to it, and show some tacos or a Coca-Cola, and advertise in Spanish, then you get people running towards that because they think like, oh man, yeah, that's who I am. Yes, because they've already embraced that identity and they relate to those things by way of that identity. So that's why it perpetuates these people to continue identifying under that banner, under that term.
Thank you. I want to say welcome, Ramon.
Hello.
Hey, what's up, man?
Nice to meet you. You're also.
Nice to meet you guys.
I forget you leave some comments sometimes too. I'm always like, I tell people like I'm going back and forth looking at the comments and like trying to listen to people on the live, and it's just like I can't see everybody. So, hey, yeah, thanks for coming on. Ramon, are you streaming from the States or a different place?
Yeah. I'm here in South Texas.
Oh, awesome. That's great. I'm glad we have fans in South Texas.
Cool.
Yeah.
We got a lot of Southern Texans on the ID Native page.
Yeah, I'm from McAllen, from the RGV.
Ah, okay, right off the border. This is kind of like this is an embarrassing hobby that I have, but when I'm like super bored, I'll go on like, I think it's called realestate.com, and I'll look at houses that I can never get. And then one time I like typed up McAllen, which is like right on the border because border towns living there is relatively cheap.
Oh yeah.
I always like found like these giant houses for like very cheap, not expensive prices.
I bought a house in 2017 with 4 bedrooms for $152,000. So yeah, it's pretty cheap prices.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and if you don't mind me asking too, Ramon, like how long have you been following our channel for? Since it's
I want to say like a few months.
Oh, so you're probably one of the OGs, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably one of the OGs.
Like I was working for the census. Like earlier, they were talking about the census, and I tried to do the same and identify as Native American. But since, like they were saying, if you're not part of a federally recognized tribe, you pretty much can't do anything about it. And I discovered I had it was obvious most of my life because every time I would come to the checkpoint, like my great grandmother had property in Mexico, and whenever we'd cross the border, they would always come after me, like because of my color.
Oh, sorry to hear that, man. Is he frozen?
Oh yeah, Ramon, I think we're having connectivity issues with you, man.
What?
Hopefully you can resolve. Oh, you're back now. You're back, man.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, could you repeat what you said? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the last we heard is when you cross the border, you suffer a lot because of like your color.
Right, the color and the way that the way that we look. Like whenever I watch the channel, I'm like, oh hey, look, there's my bros. There's all my people. But they always come after us. Like if you're going through the checkpoint, like before there was passports, before it was like there was a solid verification of your citizenship. They would hound you, man. They would be like, oh, well, where'd you learn to speak English so good? And, or what school do you go to? And, like, who are your parents? And I would literally be riding in the car with my parents. But since you look indigenous, yeah.
Yeah, that's messed up, man. I've heard some stories before where I forgot. I think they were acquaintances where they were telling me that whenever they cross the border patrol agents will be like, "Let me look through your cell phone just to find if they're like fraudulently crossing or something." And I'm just like, that's a complete violation of the Fourth Amendment.
Civil
you can't
rights.
just search. Yeah, civil rights. You can't just search through somebody's phone. It's like the moment you're on American soil, they have rights as well that adhere to the Constitution. I was like, that is extremely messed up.
Yeah, and even visiting like the state parks that are on the river, there's border patrol there, and they're looking for illegals. So you could be walking around, and they'll just stop you, and they'll be like, ask you like 100 questions. And if you don't have ID, like they can detain you and crap like that. It's messed up.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I didn't go through that. I mean, I was brought illegally, but I was a baby, and they used like the fake papers of another baby that looked similar to me, and that's how I got
Yeah,
across them.
I live here on the border, and I pretty much know like how a lot of that goes. Um, you know, and even here, like we've got a lot of people that aren't here legally, but I mean they just blend in, because we have like it's like 88% our people, like brown. Like you look around here, like if you ever visit here, it's pretty cool because you blend right in, and there isn't. I mean, there are racist white people here, but for the most part, we're the majority, and like an extreme majority. So it's not so bad, but yeah. What do you call it? It's from here to the checkpoint, which is like 67 miles. The border patrol can detain you just for being brown. So
Yeah, man. I hope they get sued by people that are citizens, man. I hope they get freaking sued.
One thing that I want
yeah,
to add on to what Ramon was saying is that I think a lot of it too, if you think about it down in the valley, it's like we're the majority there. And because we need to make a living, a lot of our people resort to working with Border Patrol, resort to working with immigration. And it's
yeah,
that self-hatred that we continue to perpetuate in our jobs. We'll be like, oh, this a brown person that looks just like my brother must be up to no good or must be illegal, and it's a
yeah,
cycle.
yep. And it's funny because my relatives are border patrol, and one of them looks so.
One of them looks so what? Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely like issues going on, and we can go back to like even like in Arizona as well. I think with the what was his last name, Arparo, where he literally got sent to I don't know if he was arrested, but he was put in court for making sure that people that did like look obviously distinctively native um, be questioned by the ICE border patrol. So
Oh yeah, was it SB 1070? The show me your papers.
yeah,
They could pull you over. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah,
And then he had the jails practically like in parking lots where he detained undocumented people, just in these makeshift jail cells. It was really ridiculous. I think he got sent to jail, if I'm not mistaken, for what he did.
Man, that is crazy. I always hear some really racist shit coming from Arizona. Here in Alabama, at least in my city of Huntsville, if the police stop somebody and they're illegal, they don't fuck with that. Even though they know that the person's illegal, they don't do anything with that shit. Which I think is interesting. That even here in Alabama, but then again, this city I live in is more liberal. It's grown more liberal over time. So, but yeah, I always heard some really shit
yeah.
policies out of Arizona.
Oh man, I drove to LA a couple years back, and I was so paranoid driving through Arizona because they can pull you over for being Mexican or for looking brown, for being brown. So they didn't pull me over though. I mean, there's a lot of brown people in Arizona too, so we kind of blend in. I guess it's just at their discretion or whatever, or maybe you got to be doing something stupid, or I don't know. It's messed up, but I don't know.
I think times are changing, and people are kind of fed up with a lot of what ICE has been doing in terms of racial profiling and whatnot as well. And I know that was like very common in the during the Trump era, but it was also like common in the Obama era as well. And I think someone had brought this up earlier, that there were like cages. I think it was Obama administration that had started the cages, and then like the media really highlighted that under the Trump administration. And those cages are still there today, you know, so it's just a disgrace.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years back, I was working refinery work in Louisiana, and man, I could go walk into a Kroger there, and man, it was like all eyes on me, and it just, I felt like I was doing wrong the way people were looking at me. But uh,
Ramon, I think my friend, I think your signal's cutting out a little bit.
Yeah, it's struggling there.
Are you good now?
Yeah, my signal sucks, I think.
It's okay. No
I'm
worries.
like trying to get close to the router, but
It's all good. Yeah, I know there's a lot of issues still with like racial profiling and what, but you know, I think with like the advancement of like technology, especially like with cell phones, like a lot more things are recorded, so all of that BS can be caught on tape, and you know, I think it'll greatly reduce more, you know, as time goes on.
yeah.
Juancho, I was going to ask you though.
I mean, other than that,
No, you're good. What were you going to say? Other than that, what?
oh, there we are. Right now is a good time, but another thing we have here in the valley that they don't have anywhere in the country is peyote, or medicine, is what the Native Americans call it. It actually grows naturally here, and it is part of our culture. For like 8,000 plus years, there's proof of us having ritual ceremony, using it as medicine, and it grows here. About an hour's drive west of McAllen. It's like literally all over the place. And you have Native Americans coming from all over North America down here to buy peyote, and they call it sacred sacrament. But we have a ton of history here in South Texas, Native American history too, archaeological digs here, you know, proving that we've been here like for over 10,000 years. But like watching you guys has really helped like a ton, because you know I'm going through the same thing, you know.
Hey, you know, that makes us feel great that you're doing that, and that you watch our channel, and knowing that, you know, you're also on your own path as well. You know, it's really reinvigorating to hear, especially, you know, from Ponchalo and I.
Yeah, that's the whole reason we have this podcast, is just because we wanted to reach people. We wanted to gather people together with this common cause. So I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Can I share something with Ramon?
Sure. Yeah.
Hey, Ramon, I would like to share with you, if you can look up on Google this article. It's called Timepieces of the Ancestors.
Okay.
And then type in the name Gary Perez. He goes into depth about Coahuilteca people, generically called Coahuilteca. But you know, and he also touches on the peyote ceremonies that are original from Texas, that northern natives are using now, but it started here, you know. But I will say that what is exclusive to Texas about those ceremonies is that the ceremonies are conducted using the geography of Texas and the skies over Texas on very particular days. And we've been told the story too. If you look at the shape of I think it's the Brazos River. It's the profile of a woman. Her neck,
Okay.
her chin, her mouth is open. You see her nose, but her mouth is open right at the peyote gardens. Right where the medicine
Okay.
grows is her mouth. And there's a story behind it. And then also look into the white shaman mural is what they call
Yeah,
it.
the white shaman I'm familiar with.
Yeah, that's a map of Texas.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a map of Texas, and it's an astronomical almanac too. That's also
I'm familiar with it. Sorry.
Oh yeah, that's all.
Oh.
That's part of the South Texas Coahuilteca culture. The territory extends. It embraces what is it? Nuevo León, Tamaulipas, Coahuila, and then Texas all the way up to the White Shaman mural, up to not
Comstock,
Abilene,
Texas. Yeah, it's Comstock,
in that
Texas,
area,
and all the way up to San Marcos.
To the Concho River.
My cousin.
Yeah, and back down.
My cousin
all the way
is,
up to the medicine wheel over at Fort Hood, and then all the way down to the border from there.
Yeah, all the way down to San Luis Potosí. My cousins are part of the Tepelam, the tribe here in Texas. On my great grandmother's side, that's how I actually discovered my identity. I was digging, and my fourth great grandfather was the Indian governor of Mission San Jose. So in my family, I have ancestors that actually fought for Texas independence, and it was a slap in the face, when they started calling us Mexicans, and when they tried to get rid of the Apaches in Texas, that's where we lost our identity. We went from being Indians, we went to being Mexicans just so we wouldn't get killed here in Texas. So
we wouldn't be deported to Oklahoma. So that was a deportation issue too. And a lot of Texas natives became Mexicans overnight.
Yeah, literally
just
overnight.
to avoid deportation or avoid being killed.
Or lynchings. Yep.
Hey Ramon, have you or are you gonna try to join the Tapilam Qualiteca Nation, or your cousins are part of it?
Yes, but right now with the whole COVID thing, it's kind of messed up. But my great grandmother, doing more digging on Ancestry, her baptism. She's from San Luis Potosí, and her baptism lists her as Origen Indio. So that's another, root. I could say, and it's even this is literally she died in I think 2004. So I got to spend time with her, and I took it all for granted. I'm looking back in it now, but she had so many herbal cures in her backyard. She had so much knowledge, and now I know why. Because she's native. She's Indian, and she would do the curandero stuff, and all of that's our culture. That's something that is native that the Spanish didn't teach us. On how herbal cures and other healings and stuff like that. So for people that say that we lost our culture, no, our culture has been with us. We just take it for granted. There's a lot of words that we still use in the Mexican language that are Nahua, like aguacate, huaraches, chamaco. There's a lot of words that we still use that are actually native words, that they're not Spanish, it's really cool, when you can remember your older ancestors.
I think that it's just that we take for granted so much of what we do, and we just think that it's new, or many times we even accredit it to foreigners like Spain and things like that. Like when you think of, even in the words that we use, there's a lot of power there. Like when you think of vanilla and people say, oh, that's French vanilla. Well, vanilla is actually indigenous, and things
Yes.
like tomatoes and onions and so many of things that we cultivated that we assume are Italian or potato. We associate that with the Irish when they're indigenous to us. That's
No.
ours, and it's just, again, another theft of our history, of our creations, of our cultures, and then it just gives you like it again, it just kind of gives you that feeling of like, well, damn, if you really listen to what they have taught us, then
Yeah.
what are we, just savages? Nothing. We were brainless
There's
until
proof.
1992.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's archaeological proof.
You hit the nail on the head, Diana. I mean, exactly. That's how I think that these people, a lot of Western historians, unfortunately, want to believe that we were just like savages and like there was no cultivation of food or anything. It all came from like Spain, and that's it. I mean, I bet even in Texas, like everything that Ramon just mentioned is really not talked about in the education system in Texas. And Alejandro, maybe you can agree to that too.
Yeah.
They want to, those that are in charge or higher up want to keep this like a secret, or what? They don't want it talked about. They want us to remain as like, these Christian like monsters.
These ignorant people, yeah.
That's the conversation they don't want to have,
Yep.
because when our numbers start popping up, like when we start declaring who we are, and we start bringing all this out, and laying it out on the table, all the millions of instances of of what they did and what they continue to do, a great debate's gonna it's gonna have to come out in the public. I was like, oh man, okay, the United States is stolen native.
Oh man,
they don't want that. Yeah, I was like, oh man, I thought we got rid of these guys. I thought, why are they not calling themselves Hispanic or Latino or Mestizo anymore? What's going
We're
on here?
not. We woke up.
It's like they're all over the news talking about stolen native land. Now they're going to come after us. They're going to come after the ranches. They're demanding this and that.
We're due a lot of land back, especially here in South Texas.
Actually, all of Texas.
Yeah, all of Texas. Yeah, all of it.
All of the United States, all of Canada, all of Mexico, everything. Yeah.
Well, I think
but our situation here in South Texas is different because we've flown under so many flags here in Texas, and that is exactly why we don't have a res here in Texas, because one, the Catholic Church stole our identities. They gave us Spanish names, and what do you call it? Then we became Mexico, so we became Mexican citizens. Then Texas became a country, and then the Texas, joined the U.S. So we got cheated out of, everything basically. We got screwed really bad. And then here in South Texas, they stole when the Anglos came down here, they stole all the land deeds when they were Spanish grants, for a lot of the people that were here. This is our homeland, So yeah, we got it from all sides,
I was going to invite you, Ramon, to explore that San Luis Potosi line more, because if you're interested, because I mean that
Yeah,
could
no, yeah.
you could be Guachichil and you could join us. You could join us. We're still in San Luis Potosí. We're still looking
Right.
for descendants. So I'm just throwing that out there. If you
No,
You
yeah,
could be
and when
Guachichil.
you had talked about that being from San Luis Potosí area too, I was like, holy shit, that could be my great grandmother's tribe, I'm looking for her parents' christening or baptism records to
Do
see.
you remember what city she was born in? Because I know a lot of them just off the top of my head.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I actually have it on my browser. Let's see. She is from La Villa de San Nicolás Florentino in San Luis Potosí.
All right. I haven't heard of that one city, but I'd like to look more into that. But I find it interesting because for those of you that don't know with the genealogy, it's really rare to find a genealogical record in the 1900s or like the late 1800s that states Indio, Indígena, any of that. It's very rare to find.
Yeah.
Because
her mother, I think, was more white, but her father was just brown enough to piss off the priest for him to write it down. Because you're right, in the early 1900s, you hardly ever see origen indio.
No, and I mean I have a second great grandfather and third great grandparents in Coahuila, and they were written down as raza indígena, which is really rare too. But I find it in my own lines. But yes, it's very rare to see that so late in the game. Yeah,
it's at the time that's something like really racist. That priest must have been hungover or was offended by them in some way, or with the Catholic Church, man. Like I've from everything I've read, they're a bunch of assholes. Evil, just flat out evil. We've taken so much abuse from them. It's not even funny. Like,
yeah. No, they hated it. They hated the Guachichils. They actually supported the War of Fire and Blood, like the genocide against us, because the friars were really mad that the Guachichils would fill them up with fucking arrows whenever they try to convert people.
Hey, man. If you see something wrong, you got to do something about it.
Yeah, I just remember reading through the historical accounts, and the Guachichil historian says that too, but it's just hilarious. It's like the friars would try to go in there and just talk like, yeah, they get lit up, bro.
The friars are pretty.
That reminds me of a story.
Yeah, a story.
Yeah. Yes.
You care to share the story?
Yes.
Were you going to tell? Oh, okay. Well, I mean, were you going to share the story?
Yep, it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. Alejandro, I think were you going to say something?
Oh, what Juan Cholo was saying about the Huachichil, it sounds like a similar experience over in Teul, Zacatecas, with the Mixton War. They couldn't. It was it was like almost a 60-year-long war between the Spaniards and what were they called, the Kashkan people and other Chichimeca tribes of that region of Jalisco and Zacatecas. But the same thing, a friend of mine found an entry recorded that once the natives that were being baptized by the Spaniards, the people who resisted and did not get baptized, they would go take their ancestors down to the same river and they would baptize them again in their way to undo what the Spaniards were doing to their people, and also the same thing, they were excellent archers too. I read where these Spanish soldiers would throw an orange up in the air, and the Kashkan archers would just keep it up in the air just slicing it with arrows up in the air. And then finally they stopped and they let the orange fall to the ground, and it was incomplete shreds.
Dana, were you going to say something?
Oh yeah, no, just building on what Alex was saying is that also too, I know that we have different forms of resistance. Like people, I think that in general, we tend to have a picture painted of us that our resistance was okay, Tenochtitlan was quote unquote conquered and that was it. But no, our resistance, led on for years and years, and obviously it's still ongoing. But like, for example, we didn't welcome Catholicism or Christianity with open arms either. It's like even when it was forced upon us, and they would put like, say, the Virgin Mary, like their idols in front of us, we would put our our statues underneath, and we would be praying to like Tonantzin or like our our different representations. We it was an ongoing resistance, so that's why it's sometimes it can get really frustrating when people say that we passively gave in, or or that was it, like it was just a war and we lost, quote unquote. But no, this is an ongoing resistance, and the reason why so many of us are Catholic or Christian or whatever, it's a force it's forced upon us, but also too it's the way that we survived, that in order to avoid death, well, we we had to funnel our real cultures and traditions through that.
Yeah, no,
and
I've noticed that just at, commenting on what you said, where people think that the Mexica lost and then that was it, and it's just like, yeah, I've just run into many ignorant commenters on online people that are just not educated. It's like no, the longest North American war was with the Guachichio, which lasted for 50 years. Like that was like that, like the Mexica falling was a drop in the bucket compared to how much men they lost trying to fight us for 50 years. And yet our shit never gets mentioned to anybody, which I'm trying to change that.
Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly. Or how even it wasn't even Catholicism really that kind of converted us. It was just the fact that we were trying to survive, and it was kind of like, well, if you're gonna enslave us in the mines, whatever, we want to be able to our families to continue to go on. Well, we're gonna go ahead and quote unquote accept your religion, but we're gonna make sure that our culture thrives through that. And that's why Catholicism in Mexico, Catholicism in Guatemala is by and large indigenous as well. And in different, different aspects. It's not going to be the same Catholicism as Europe either.
oh yeah, it's been
Yeah.
indigenized.
There's no real borders.
Yeah, and I wanted to add one thing is that there's so many stories made up by the Spaniards as far as something that I think they said that we thought that the Spaniards were gods or something like that. And then Neil deGrasse had the goal to go on, I think it was Joe Rogan's podcast, to say that Christopher Columbus had went to some island. I think he had reached Central America, and that he had convinced the natives not to kill him because he said that he controlled the sun and the moon, and that the moon was I think there was a oh gosh, can't think of it right now, but the moon was covered at some time of the night, and I guess the natives thought that he said that the natives thought that there was an apocalypse or something coming on, and he said that he survived, and everyone thought that he was a god, and that's how he made it back to Spain. And I know that that's a lie. Alejandro, I see you shaking your head. I assume you agree.
Especially the source. I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson has made himself to be the voice of so-called science, and he has no authority to be speaking on our history. Well, then again, who does, right? I mean, we're all learning, but for it to come from his mouth, I mean, I don't trust him. And where is that? Was it ever even recorded, or he just made it up? I mean, it's just, where anything that paint us as like foolish savages that didn't know anything. It's like, why were we using the stars to mark our every move? The planets, the moon and the sun. It's like, if anything, we were some of the original astronomers, along with other ancient supercultures around the earth.
An eclipse happened. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Definitely. And I'm reading a book right now. I forgot the name, but it has Koyo Shauki on the cover, and it's about how the Mexica, well, her notion is that the Mexica believe that Koyo Shauki is bleeding, and that's a representation of a woman's, reproduction, like, when she, and how actually our ancestors knew that, our when a woman has her period, like, it's tied to the moon phases and things like that. And it's just a very interesting book, and I never heard it, because, in the society that we live in, when a woman has her period, or when a woman gets pregnant, things like that, it's very it's kind of seen as a negative thing, and it's seen as dirty or whatever. Oh, she's on the rag, this and that. But our ancestors, our worldview is so different than what's the dominant permanent worldview right now, or the permeating worldview. And it's just, it really opens your eyes as to how the big difference into how, women were treated then, and how we're viewed as now, and it's just it's very detailed, because it goes into detail on how pregnancy and creating life was viewed, as opposed to how it is now. I don't know. It's a really good book.
Oh, it sounds good.
It's called Koyo Shauki, another scientific book for indigenous societies, a partera's perspective, and it's written by a midwife.
Oh, that's amazing. More information is coming out on the, I don't know how, back in 2003, when I began to remember, and it was a long road of acceptance, to remember who I was. It's like, many people, when they're waking up, they think that they're the only ones coming around. But then with like the internet, a lot of us are coming together, and we're recognizing one another, and we're realizing that there's actually millions and millions of us, and I never thought I would get to this day when I would see so many people doing the same thing that I did, so many people coming around, waking up and remembering.
Yeah.
And then, when the information is just coming out like crazy, like more and more books, more and more papers and research is being done.
Exactly. It's really beautiful to see. I started my journey when I was in 2004. I was 14, but I felt so discouraged, because so many people around you will be like, oh, well, like my parents, would be like, oh, this is just a hobby. Dinah's really interested in her indigenous culture, but what so people, gets very discouraging. So you kind of live your life and you think you're the only one, but when you get older and you get to communities like this, and it's like, damn, this is really a real thing. It's like a reminder, like your ancestors are always there reeling you back in. It's something you can't explain. It's pulling you in always.
Yep, that is very true. And and for a lot of the people here who are remembering and looking for the way, just remember your ancestors are with you, and chances are they've been helping you and guiding you, and we must never forget who we came from.
Yep, I agree.
That's perfectly said, Alex. We can't ever forget where it all started, and maybe we are at about like 3 hours and 3 minutes. So I'm sure y'all probably want to get going or want to keep it going. I'm fine with that, but some of us, or maybe all of us do have work tomorrow. But before we end, any of y'all want to share any opposition maybe you faced on this path? To our guest in particular, if you'd like to share that, or
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
just any opposition you face, and as far as like finding like your roots and whatnot, like maybe opposition from family, criticism from others, friends, um, or people saying no, you can't be like native, because we're always curious on people's different experiences.
Well, my husband recently was curious about his native side, and I was looking at his family photos. They all have like Afro, but they never consider themselves like Afro indigenous. So then my husband officially asked his mom, are we indigenous? And she said no. And then she started pulling up photos of herself and her family, saying like, look, we're pale. We're not brown. We're like a light brown. And I was just like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like, why is she pointing out that she's light brown and she has family that's light brown? Like, she's not ashamed of like her like black side, but she was more ashamed of her indigenous side. And that was really weird. I have never seen something like that before.
And that's a sad thing, unfortunately, that I think, especially in Mexico, that we're taught, like our parents, well, again, I'm not Mexican, but like people's parents and grandparents are taught to like, be proud of just being Eurocentric and getting rid of the blemishes of dark skin and any like ancestry. This is a new time, and we're Latinos are mestizos now. And close the door on indigenous identity. There's no going back, as some people like to say, unfortunately. So I think that that does trickle down into the younger. I think the younger generations are waking up more, but I think that the media, especially the media in Central, Mexico, Central America and Mexico in particular, was able to preach this anti-native narrative for a very long time because no one was able to question or
They still do.
yeah, they still do exactly. But I think now there's more like criticism of this because you have this podcast and many other people that are reclaiming like who they finally are. Like enough of being told something that we clearly are not, or being told, and I call it propaganda because that essentially is what it is to us, indigenous to native people such as ourselves. Um, and more people are waking up, but unfortunately, like the older generations were told something much more different. Um, Ramona, and you said that it's still going on. Karina, are you going to say something?
Yeah, it wasn't like they're not Mexican. His mom's side is like from Honduras, like close to the what is it called? I don't want to like mispronounce it, like the Gruifinas, something like that.
Yeah, the Garifuna.
Yeah, that. That's that is he's like from that side, and then
Okay.
for his dad's side, he's from El Salvador. And from what I found out, like I kind of understand why he doesn't like identify himself as indigenous, and it's because like I read up on somewhere that says that they actually went after indigenous people. Like if you dress like one, they'll right off the bat like they'll just kill you. So that's why he didn't identify as indigenous either.
Did you say
Wow.
kill you? That's
Yeah, like they called it something. It was like something really, really big that it was very known in El Salvador. I forgot what it was called. But like they literally killed anybody who identified indigenous or like dressed as one. They literally would just kill you right there, no questions asked.
see, and that's how bad like this propaganda and lies is. As I said in Central America as well, it's very anti-native, and it still is today. Like Ramon said, um,
Yeah. They
and
criticize their current president because he identifies as part of indigenous. They call him a pinche indio, is what I've heard.
Damn, in Honduras?
No, in Mexico.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Obrador, and he actually recently gave land back to a tribe in Mexico. I'm not. I don't remember which tribe exactly, but uh, he's doing for the natives of Mexico like a little bit at a time, but something's better than nothing. Like I do remember that Trump, even though he was like a flat out racist, he gave something like 80 billion or something to the Navajo Nation. Uh, Not a lot of people know that, but he did, and that to me is important. If when the governments of a country can, here in the Americas, can actually uh, do something for the original peoples of the land.
And that's why we have these channels for people to embrace like their indigenous, native heritage. Because if there's not, then you're just going to have a government that continues to like throw these false narratives and this self-hatred for people that obviously clearly are native or indigenous, and
Yeah,
told that they're Hispanos, and be proud of mestizaje. Or I guess from what I was told, Latinidad is not as popular. It seems more of an American term. Uh, but again, like, but mestizaje, I believe, is real for some people, and maybe not the word itself, but it's the roots of it, as far as like being, you know, this disgrace for being brown, essentially, or dark skin. And we're on this channel to, advocate for a lot of things, and one of those is to, be proud of who you are, and don't be told something that's from a self-hating, media that's ran by, the elite. And I'm going to tell you, like, the elite in many countries in Central and South America do not care for indigenous native people. I think that's well documented, and it's very evident today. Um, so
yeah, it's
you're
a
here.
shame.
Yeah, it is. But more people are waking up, and things are changing. So
Yep.
there is a prosperous future ahead.
Yeah,
That
I tell more and more people, have you done your DNA? Have you done, any genealogy? Because you're obviously not white, and you know, you do need to investigate because you've been living a lie for 20, 30, 40 years, Uh, I know I was, and I was always trying to try and belong to groups.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just, I think again, it takes more time for people to realize this. And like you said, like the DNA test and whatnot, like Peru is, I read a statistic, and I'm not 100% sure how accurate it was. So like Peru is like, its population is, at least the average is 85% like indigenous Native American. But unfortunately, they are taught at a very young age, a lot of them, living in urban cities, that you are native because it's a cultural thing. You are something else. You're a Latino. You're Latin. Um, so when you have that media telling you certain things, and you have teachers telling you this, then that's how they're going to think, unfortunately. And it's a bad narrative. And again, it takes time to change that. But right now, we're here in the U.S., and I think that our work has been all right so far. Juanchalo, I hope you would agree.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's been good. We got our haters, but it's fine, bro. We got our
Yeah,
bandits.
yeah, yeah. The bandits.
Yeah, I welcome haters like some of my family members too. Like, oh no, we're not, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, uh, you need to wake up. You are, and we have been for like thousands of years.
Yeah, like the Spaniard people. What people don't understand, and for everyone listening out there, is that the Spanish were not here in like the millions when they came to when they arrived in 1492. There's a very small group of them, and it remained like that for a very long time, even into the independence movements. like the native populations outnumbered the Spaniards by almost 1,000,000 to 1. Of course, you had the disease and whatnot as well, and you had the savage, you know, encomiendas and the other, you know, slavery-based systems that killed us in droves. But even though, like, they did do a lot of damage to, like, the populations, we still outnumbered the Spaniards for a very, very long time. Um, so I think that, again, that's something that's not really taught in history. Um,
Honestly, I think that being Mexican myself, I think that a lot of our people do know. It's just the fact that maybe because, being indigenous, being brown is seen as a negative thing, as, savage thing, because of course everyone in the Mexican nationality, they want to claim Azteca, Mexica, all of that. But when it comes to like who we are as indigenous people, it's looked down upon. So no one wants to be something that's looked down upon. I think that that's that's also something that needs to be brought to light. The fact that we don't want to be associated with something that's put in place to seem negative. This is a way it was set up to be, like for you to be ashamed of who you really are. And that's how this power structure remains, all across our lands. That's how they're able to maintain this power over us, because if we knew who we really are, if we knew uh you know who created these Deucalis, who created, all of these beautiful things on our own land, my goodness, I mean, we would be running our own land still, because we like we all know we have the power in numbers. We just don't know who we are. We're lost, and it's a very frustrating thing.
yeah,
And the ones who know uh, refuse to unite. Well, there's a small contingent.
Exactly.
You know,
Oh
but
yeah.
I know that we represent the larger majority, those who are in favor of unifying, because they think one of the fears or the concerns that were raised was like, are you trying to create this like pan Indian nation, or it's like, we're not. The only thing we want is for all. If we really want our liberation, we just have to come to that simple agreement, and meet, make that compromise. It's like, okay, our land is still being illegally occupied by foreign invaders, intruders, and they continue to live off of us as a human resource, and they continue to feed off of us and our resources.
I
Which
agree, Alex.
And just on that alone is like, do you want to live in chains? Do you want to live in this, like, in some illusion of like their colonial peace where we could all get along? Or what kind of future do you want to see for your children if you have children? you know so the only way to do this is like where we have to come together for you know this war, and end this warfare against us, and like for a final battle, where we're able to flex, to show our power in numbers as one united race for this cause. It's like some people think that we're trying to erase all the nations in favor of one giant pan-Indian nation. No, it's like, it's about coming together for this common cause, and that's it. Then you can all go back home for a while.
Exactly. The battle against white supremacy is our unifying factor here on our own continents.
And not even that. It's like you can't have white supremacy without white people. It's
Right.
like we gotta put the finger on who's been causing this.
I mean,
You
yeah,
know,
if you look in the South American countries again, like who controls the media in, Mexico and a lot of these Central and South American nations, and it isn't like native indigenous people.
no,
Unfortunately, it's the Spanish descendants of, a lot of criollos run it, elite criollos who, to be frank, again, as I say, don't care that much about indigenous issues, much less indigenous native people themselves, and that's just the truth. Um, And that
Yeah,
is,
I mean anything to remember. Like the ultimate goal is they are not about to lose what they've got. You know.
so why would they say that we're all native? Why would they
Yeah,
want to
exactly. That does not suit their goals because
It's inconvenient.
they're not going to walk us. All right, guys, you figured it out. We're going to go back. It's all yours again. Sorry about this. You know,
No.
we're just going to give it all back. No, they're not going to give it up without a fight. You know, they're not going to give it up with you. We're going to be met with resistance. But you know, if we use their system, we can take it all back. You know,
Yeah, but what we have to
there's
be
many
worried
ways
about.
to take it back.
Well, like I think a lot of good platforms is like, you know, like now I guess Peru just voted in their indigenous president as well. I know like Evo
That's
Morales, I
awesome.
know that yeah, I know that Evo Morales maybe he had, you know, some people may not agree with everything that he did, but also too like he did so many good things for his people too. And Bolivia is majority indigenous, and he was what, the first indigenous president? That's ludicrous. That's insane.
Yeah, we need our first. we
Yeah,
like we definitely need our first indigenous president here too.
Yeah.
maybe Deb could be president. Deborah Howland. Howland? I think that's her last name. How to pronounce it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's how long, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of brown people. There's a lot of Native people, and a lot of them are calling themselves, you know, because they don't know Mexican or Mexican American, Chicano or whatever. But they're filling up the ranks. You know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, who would have even considered even a Native woman running one of these high end, like a higher end of like the government? And who would have thought that a Native American would be up at the top, like running the BIA, like Deb Holland? You
Yeah,
know,
that's an accomplishment.
you know, the fact that, you know, that whether it's a trick or not, or they're just using her for window dressing, the point stands. If there's a Native American, there's a brown woman in that position, and that's going to create more of a debate, which is going to bring a conversation out. More people are going to be talking about it, just like what we're doing with the census. If we can get more people, more brown, indigenous, Native Americans, no matter where they're from, living here in the north, to fill out the census, we can triple that number by 2030 and really create a stir. Where are all these Indians coming from? Where are all these Native Americans coming from? It's like, oh, look around.
Yeah.
We've
Look
been
around.
here.
I want
Yeah,
to.
we've been here.
I want to see change, especially for those people that are living in those environments that aren't so easy for them right now. Those in rural Native communities, and again, like just making a difference and the things that can be done. It's endless, and I have faith. One day, as I told Wancholo, we'll get Deb on here.
Yeah.
Deb, if you're watching,
Say yes. Just keep saying yes, and the opportunities will arise.
Yeah, right. Thank you. But that being said, we are at 3 hours and 22.
Well, before we leave, Marcus, I'm sure people in the chat want you. Can you say Jose Vasconcelos?
Gosh.
Can you please say that again,
Jose
bro?
Vasconcelos.
All right, you gave the chat what they
happy?
wanted, bro. Yeah, bro.
All right. I'm glad you got that. But if anyone else didn't have anything, I think we will wrap up. We'll have plenty of lives, plenty of guests, plenty of other things we have on our agenda in the future. So, Diana, Karina, and Ramon, we appreciate you all coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Thanks.
It's great hearing your guys' voices, your all's voices talk.
Thank you. Thank
Don't
you.
stop. Don't
Yeah,
stop.
I admire everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Lasso Kamati.
Let's
Good
go
night,
back.
guys. Bye. Everyone on the chat, stay tuned for another video. See y'all later.